Sir, before that, Sun Devils, Utes.
Sun Devils.
Go Utes.
Sun Devils will prevail. There'll be tears in the desert.
This year.
Utes, number 15.
Negative.
Under Herman Edwards now. So, okay. Thank you, sir. Indulging me. Sir, 1.1 is information, recognition, and progress, achievements, and improvements. I would like to share with you much progress and achievements related to the automation of the minimum school program. If you'd invite members from IT, Jared, your crew, bring them up here. Jamie, please. That's okay, Chair. We'll be real quick with this, but it's worth all seeing what great looks like and where we're headed. So, Jared, I don't know if you want to tee it off.
Hey, go ahead. I just want to introduce the MSP team here. Starting off with Curtis. This is Jen Yates. And this is Emma. You guys know Jen. Anyways, these guys have been working feverishly since I've been here on this MSP project. They delivered a what I'd call a minimal viable product. We did a budgetary estimate module. And I'll let Jen take over and tell you a little bit more about what they delivered. Jamie here.
So you're looking at our minimum viable product, kind of high-level overview of what was released to the website. This is the first year that Jamie's actually been able to use the website in production to be able to not only automatically retrieve all of the year-end source data and October enrollment data, but to use that in the projections process, including counting projections. We've also given her tools where she can add, apply CDC adjustments to that data. There's historical tracking of the website built in, so any adjustments are noted by username and date timestamp for the auditability requirements. She can export all the data sources. She can build her own reports, including the program summary report. She can create calculations, edit calculations, approve calculations, and we've preloaded all of those in there for her for all of the above the line items. So it's a really great milestone for us this year. I don't know if you want to add anything.
Basically, the system will now do what used to take 2 weeks worth of my time in relatively a couple of days now. So it's a great improvement for the minimum school program, for the budgeting process, and as we continue to get additional formulas built into this for the rest of for below the line, it'll just continue to improve all of our processes, both on IT, data and statistics side, and in financial operations.
Subject to your questions, Chair, questions from the Finance Committee members. Out with you. Great progress. Much appreciation to the IT support of the financial operations staff.
Congratulations.
Chair. And this is really significant, and it's pretty much you guys' fingerprints are all over it. And this is, and I'm not an IT person at all, but I do know this, that when you have these fantastic authors and creators and this thing gets packaged up, then and you go, oh good, great, now it's running. Then there's this maintenance side of it. And I'm just curious, with all of this intelligence that's at the table, and that how do we move forward, preserve the integrity of this system?
I'll answer that. So at this time, we have 2 more. We're still in the acquisition phase of this product, so we're still developing this product. This piece that they've released is the budgetary estimate piece. There are 2 other milestones that they need to achieve prior to going to sustainment. And once they do get the sustainment, the plan is to have one of these folks here sustaining this application.
So the budget's in, and so you're going to work on these other tasks to finish it. But meanwhile, it's in. I'm curious. Should I be concerned, or is there a concern? Because there's an evolution. It seems like my IT people, when they come to me, they come with asking for money and making promises.
Yes.
Usually at the same time to stay current, and very seldom we have the opportunity to pat them on the back and say, great job for everything that's going on, because this is constantly moving. You know, you're seeking betterments within the system, so you've never really arrived, is what I'm saying. So I'm just curious, this is great, and maybe there isn't a risk as we're moving forward.
For long-term sustainment, is there a long-term? I don't believe there's a long-term sustainment risk. Like I'm saying here, at the end of once the product is fully implemented, which there should be, there's 2 other modules that need to be put in place after that. One of these fine folks here will be the people staying back to maintain it. That makes sense.
Utilizing current staff,
Yes.
so we won't need any increases. We're not going to be increasing staff to sustain this.
Wondering if there is something. I'm not complaining.
No,
Yeah,
I know.
no.
On my company side, they think they have this bad reputation of always asking for money and making promises, and so we laugh about it a little bit because they are really valuable, and you guys are really valuable. I hope you don't take offense to it, but it's that payment, I call it the maintenance side, the evolution side. When you create these and fantastic systems, they've got to be updated, constantly updated. Betterments are constantly happening, and just want to make sure that on our end we're aware of what it is or what right looks like as we're moving this forward.
And with the new project, as USIM's coming on board, some of these staff may transition over to there to bring some of that institutional knowledge to help on that.
Can I just make a point that we've actually spent almost the entire last year doing testing with Jamie. We have regular meetings bi-weekly now with her. It used to be every week. But to your point, we've done a lot of testing before we've even pushed this out to production. That said, there was a little bit of maintenance tasks in the production site that we had to do this week that did take away from some development work, but that's to be expected, and we generally build those into our estimates.
I'm just hoping the main part is constantly
Budgeted for. Yes. Yes.
All right, can I just?
I'm all smiles. I'm not being critical.
No, our team has done an amazing job. Like the steps of everything are documented. We have a testing plan in place, maintenance is in place. Everything has been thought of from beginning to end, and it's all great. It's all, to these wonderful folks to my right. I just want to tell them how grateful I am. It's been a long road, and I'm glad they've stuck with me through it. So I just want to tell them thank you.
So at a classroom level, as I'm looking at this list, I'm just going to tell you that current year October enrollment and aggregating our enrollment by grade and by group and by LEA and by county and aggregation of, these things are like a lot of words, but when I look at them, I'm like, this impacts my classroom tremendously. And to have this be completely dynamic every day and upgraded every day really changes the face of our classrooms, because we can actually do what we are intending to do and inform our instruction by the grades and they are demographic. So, for a layperson, it might just look like, oh yeah, whatever. But for me, I'm like, this is so exciting. And this year we've had a lot of people move in and move out. And trying to get this information current in our district has been a struggle. So I can only imagine how hard it is on a state level. So I really appreciate all the work you've put into this and how when it works, it's amazing. And it works 99.9% of the time. So thank you so much for all the work you do. And especially at the end of the year when we're doing our assessments and the kids are moving back and forth. We have 800,000 students, and a kid moves from one district to the next, And a day later, he's sitting in his seat in his class in a whole other part of the state, and his name is right there, is amazing to me. So thank you so much, Bob.
Awesome. Anything else under 1.1?
Chair.
On to 1.2, Deputy Jones.
R277-122, Board of Education procurement. If Ben will come forward and Zach.
No.
I think you two will do. So introduce yourselves to the chair, or through the chair to the committee. And go ahead and, subject to the chair's direction, proceed with this.
Dan Rasmussen, Director of Law and Professional Practices.
Zach Christensen, Director of Purchasing Contracts.
Tell them what we're doing.
Which one do you want me to open?
Draft 1. Oh, is there?
Draft 2?
Draft 2. Why did I print out draft 1? Yes, draft
2. We are seeking to amend a few of the different rules that we have here. The majority of them are just some cleanup because we have in the rule that the board has appointed me as the Director of Purchasing Contracts and Head of the Procurement Unit. You'll see a lot of the references that were changed from Superintendent to the Head of the Procurement Unit. That's just for consistency's sake. That's just some of the cleanup. The major requests that we're changing, if you will look down on lines, starting on about 119, we are looking to raise the small purchase threshold with the different changes that have happened at the federal level, raising the micro purchase threshold to $10,000, the simplified acquisition threshold to $250,000. We are seeking to increase our small purchase threshold to the $10,000, but then our, which would be the equivalent to the simplified acquisition threshold to $75,000, and that's for bids and quotes. For the quotes.
So for what it's worth, with my input, I support this from my position. As some of you recall, when we first came on, we actually had lowered the purchase limit for more controls. The last 2 quarters, as Zach testified to last month, our audit results, no findings. Unfortunately, I think we're going to have one maybe minor finding this quarter. But my point is that back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were getting multiple findings, 12, 15. But with the procedures and process, the appointment of Zach, his crew, all that, I'm comfortable that we can still maintain the internal controls we need to do on these thresholds. Zach, anything on that?
I totally agree with that, and as we are a central procurement unit here for the board, this would only affect the purchasing staff. The different sections are not able to purchase items on their own. It would still need to come through our staff, and we have our regular trainings, and that I feel confident that my staff would be able to maintain procurement integrity of the whole process.
Zach, is this for just us internally, or is it for all LEAs?
It does, yeah.
They still would go through their own procurement process.
The different LEAs, their rules are set by the procurement policy board. That's up through the state under Part 2 of the procurement code. So the board is the rulemaking authority only for the.
And why is this just for goods and not for services? Goods and services, you're raising it.
It is for everything, for goods and services.
Chose the 10,000 cap and the $75,000 cap to be consistent with federal law, or you just kind of came up with that?
The 10,000 is consistent with the federal law. The simplified acquisition procedure or threshold, that's 250,000. I didn't want to raise our threshold to 250,000 for quotes. I still want, if anything over 75, we'd still have to do a fully competitive process, either an invitation for bids, RFP, something else.
What about raising it to 100,000? It just seems like a cleaner number.
We definitely could. I'm comfortable with that. We just want to still maintain that we're we still have some regulations as far as kind of what we will do with these smaller dollar thresholds, but still maintain that competitive process.
One of the other things that we discussed is our purchasing staff are making changes is that as we get a system in place where we can track some of these thresholds electronically rather than manually, we're comfortable edging up a little bit, but right now we're trying to mitigate our risk until we can get those systems.
Zach, go ahead.
And say, and the one final change that we added is at the end for the unsolicited proposals. This goes back to 712, and this would just apply only to the internal staff, saying that we have elected not to consider those as the purchasing staff. It is 312. So very end, and that would only be related to section 712 of the procurement code, which has the definition of what an unsolicited proposal is.
It's really narrow in scope.
It is. But under 712, it does say that we may elect not to consider them, and this would just be our election. We're not considering those.
May, that's an interesting word, may. They can if they want to.
That's how we say shall not. That's the, essentially that's the way the rule writing manual tells you to say you can't do this is you say you may not.
Really?
You shall or you may not.
All right. I guess I need to come up with the times. Kathleen?
Looking at lines 195 to 215, is this is this language a safeguard for our request for proposals, so that if there's a conflict or there's a question about them, we have better rules to protect ourselves?
195 to
215, it talks about point systems and threshold.
Yeah, so that I apologize. That's one of the other changes. Under the current rules, the rule for scoring is 1 to 5. We would like to change that so that if a response is completely unresponsive, we can actually award them a 0 as being not responsive, and they wouldn't receive any points. And our evaluation committees have expressed some concern about being limited with only 1 through 5 as a way to differentiate between different proposals.
Because one almost seemed like we had it, but we didn't, and so now we get the option of giving them a 0.
So that's one of the options, and then also raising it to from 0 to 10. But then if there is a different scoring mechanism, which would be more appropriate for that proposal, that we would be able to use that. We would not be limited to the 1 to 5. That's in current rule.
Thank you for getting that 0 in there. That's helpful.
Question for Ben. Ben, I think that in the past, when we look at rules, anytime staff's going to do anything, it says the superintendent's going to do it, and then the superintendent will say that determine who's going to do that from the staff. Why are we changing it from superintendent to head of the procurement unit? I'm just wondering, since all the other rules use superintendent and let her or the superintendent determine.
So there's a few rules where we've taken positions that are essentially created by statute. Like if you look in the UPAC rules, the executive secretary is referred to. We refer to the chief privacy officer in some rules. So this is a case where the head of the procurement unit is a position that's created in code. And so we're essentially saying we're going to have the specific code person with authority designated by statute fulfill these responsibilities.
Good.
I move that we accept draft 2 or first and final reading, or
first reading, recommend that the board adopt on second and final.
That's what I,
And do we put this on the consent calendar, or do we? After we vote, then we'll discuss on that, because I know the December meeting is going to be full. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous, thank you. Now I just want to be really respectful of our December full board meeting as much as possible, so maybe give me a really good reason why not. I think we're going to be highly disposed to put it all on the consent calendar.
You can say without objection, wanting to put it there and then.
Okay. Any objection to putting it on the consent calendar? No. All right. Item 1.3. Let me make this up.
1.3, Chair, is results of the school fees assurance form submissions that were due on or before October 31st, 2018. It pleases the chair and the committee. We did designate this as an action item, not knowing what the results would be in case the committee wanted to take action. I'm pleased to report that 100% of the submissions were met across the whole state. All LEAs submitted. Now what occurs following the submissions is, and in association or conjunction with the school fees task force and the way ahead that was briefed yesterday in the full board meeting, we just wanted to make sure that we're to the public, to other stakeholders, the legislature, all that we're tracking compliance, and that as of this particular gate, if you will, for compliance, we're 100%, 5 by 5. So, questions or concerns from the committee? Lists are provided.
So are they doing it, Deputy Jones?
So they did it, and what they did was they, by way of the submission process, they reached the first gate, assuring. If you'll review the lists and all that, we can also share with you what that means. It just means that by schools and all that, the LEAs, so you have LEA charter schools, right, or charter schools that are LEAs. Schools, singular schools themselves, but then you have the districts that are responsible for all the schools within their chain, so to speak, and so those are the assurances, the lists, and they're 100%. Just a few anomalies. We had one charter school that closed. Notes on that. We have one charter school that is opening. So we just basically said we made note of that for you. But this is a good indicator of the direction we're heading along the compliance lane for school fees.
Joel, can I ask a question? So Scott, was this something that they just did on their own? I mean, did you have to badger any of these people? That's what I'm saying, to get this in. This is a lot of staff work, or did most of them comply pretty easily?
A majority did comply. Right, so it was close. I mean, there was onesie twosies right at the end that we were trying to get a hold of, and I would say it was different this year in the sense of having. So it's within Deputy Superintendent Stallings' line, right, with Ben and Sybil. Sybil's the one that was tracking all of the input, and if we didn't get it, we did send out emails. Because we're keenly aware that there's attrition. For an example, we had charter school directors that changed out. One example of one submission that came in right at the 11th hour was the director had switched out back in June, right? And so the contact information and things like that. So my point with that is to answer your question is yes, there was an increased involvement of staff. But what I do anticipate is because one consideration, we were able to clean up the contact list, and so then next time or for the reminders, it shouldn't necessitate too much of, where's this at, calling, things like that. Because that was our goal, was to ensure that our contact list and the initial hey, you know, these are due by October 31st. We thought that was fair, you know, opportunity to clean it. But yes, there was some increased involvement by staff, and we did stoke the fire, so to speak, you know, to try to get people to turn these in. But really, it was like 98.9% were in, and it was just onesie twosies, and it's basically some of the submissions, like a couple of the submissions might have gone into her, you know, junk email folder or things like that, depending on the email address. So it was a good opportunity to get this.
Great, that's great on both ends. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So no action, well, no action is required. Again, we did post an action, you know, just in case. But we're not, the staff isn't seeking any action unless the committee members feel there's something you need, the information that you have.
If there's any objection, I think we'll move on to item 1.4.
Your item 1.4 is the Early Childhood Integrated Data System. I'd ask you to invite up Albert Tay. He's with our Data and Statistics section. A couple of guests here. Albert will introduce himself. The guests will introduce themselves from the Utah Department of Health. What we're seeking here, staff are seeking a motion from the respectfully request a motion by the Finance Committee to recommend to the full board the use of $300,000 from the statewide longitudinal data system grant for support of this system. Based on your review here, any questions you might ask. Also, I do want to point out to the chair and the committee that Whitney is here from Data Privacy in case there's any questions related to data privacy, if you have that. But if it pleases the chair and the committee, we'll turn it over to Albert for introductions, and then they can go ahead and present a summary childhood integrated data system.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Albert Tay. I'm staff here at USBE.
Hello, Stephen Matherly. I'm a program coordinator at the Utah Department of Health.
Mike Jolly, the technical contact for the eKid system.
Well, the grant, we have funds brought over from DWS that allows us to fund this opportunity that for the Department of Health proposal that you see before you. The whole idea of this is provide a visualization on top of other things that will aid teaching and learning section here at USBE. You get a better sense of the services that's available at the various locations here in Utah. And that's why we are willing to fund this proposal. All this is from the grant, and has been set aside for this purpose. Steve, you want to say more about this proposal?
Yeah, certainly. Many states have a statewide longitudinal data system, SLDS, and that very often covers pre-K and up to 3rd grade, 12th grade, high school, college, and career. And your ECIDS, or we call it in Utah, we call it eKids, is designed to capture early care and education services that may help that child and that family be better prepared for school readiness. So there's a lot of data that falls right under the LEA, such as a Title I, and state pre-K services, the high quality pre-K. But many of our families, especially low-income and at-risk families, receive multiple services from various programs and agencies. So if data isn't being captured by the LEA and sent up to USBE and then on to Utah Data Research Center, we capture data that falls outside of that boundary from programs such as Head Start, and we even have some Head Start programs that are in a school district, such as Davis School District. And there's other programs that help families prepare for school, such as home visiting. There's a resource referral program called Help Me Grow. And even our department, we have a developmental screening program. And that shows us how many of these children have received one or more of these services. Did they receive a developmental screening? Did they receive resource referral services from Help Me Grow or home visiting or Head Start? Now, if we can collect that data, and if USBE can continue to collect the data from the LEAs, if we can get that data to Utah Data Research Center, then we'll have a very good idea what is the distinct number of children that are receiving early care and education services. And then more importantly, after that, we can engage in research. What type of impact did we make on these young children and families with regards to school readiness? When a family maybe had a Title I pre-K or a high-quality pre-K or a high-quality child care or Help Me Grow or a developmental screening or Head Start combined with any kind of school services, what type of impact, what type of difference did we make? And first, what's the distinct count? How many children are we really serving? And so eKids can produce a distinct count regarding the data that's within our boundaries, as well as program crossover data, and then we can work with USBE and we can get that data to Utah Data Research Center, and we can begin to look at things like the kindergarten entry and exit assessment and other DIBELs and other things that happen between kindergarten and third grade transitions, and really begin to see what type of difference that we're making in these children and families' lives to help better prepare for school success. Our focus with early childhood is obviously K through 3, but we want to know that children and families were successful throughout their school and throughout their career.
Kathleen?
I think this is great. When you are a new family and you don't know the services are available to you, that's a negative impact on our society. For us to be able to ask people voluntarily to join these programs and to get the help they need is so beneficial. To see kindergarten kids come in and not, it's a lot of work to try to figure out what's going on, if they're struggling, if they're behind. I think this is a great way to move. We've made our biggest gains in K through 3 in the state, and this would only impact us positively. If we're making gains before school, then the work we have to do when we get into school is so much less. So I really think this is a fantastic use of $300,000. So I would make that motion now if anybody else doesn't have any other questions.
A little bit more discussion.
Okay.
So someday one of these kids might apply for a job to be a manager at Walmart. Walmart just type a couple things and bring up all this data and look at it and determine their hiring decision. How do we know that won't happen?
All this data, when it goes to UDRC, they're all de-identified. That's the whole purpose of having all this statewide longitudinal data system. I don't want to call it SLDS because you get the wrong impression here. The data is all de-identified, but they are logically linked. So with the UDRC legislation that was passed last year, with the creation of UDRC, can and will logically link individuals' data from preschool or this early Head Start all the way to workforce services. But you cannot readily identify individuals. They're all de-identified. That's the whole purpose of this. But we can do as aggregate, we can find out certain information as a cohort, how they're progressing, how they are towards college and career. So a Walmart manager will not be able to tap into UDRC and says, look at Albert Tay, see where it's been, what it's been doing and stuff. No one can do that.
But in the second question, I see you have the ability to filter by age, gender, race, ethnicity. Do you also ask about like whether they have two parents in the home or whether they live with their birth parents? I think variables like that are much stronger predictors of success.
That is a set of data we do not keep, or we do not even ask.
Okay, so it's okay to ask for their race, but it's not to ask, okay, if they have parents in the home.
Well, who you're referring to living with their parents or grandparents? Yeah. We do not have those information in the UDRC data set.
Why not?
We never thought about keeping that information. And if you would like, we can do that. We can request the UDRC to include those data sets if we want to. I don't think at USBE we collect all these data sets. I don't think we do.
Whether
No, we do not.
We do not collect, so it's kind of difficult. If we do not collect, we can't push out to somewhere where we don't have.
everything I've seen in sociological research, that's a much greater predictor of a child's success. If they're living in the same home as their birth mother and birth father, or they have at least two parents in the home. I know. So it's great to measure all these things, but it's discouraging to me that we aren't focusing on what I think matters most. Scott?
There will be opportunity for review of what the data elements are that were sent to the UDRC by the U.S. In the near term, coordinating with UDRC for you to identify particular research projects. So as part of that process, whatever you identify that you would like to see researched in this, cooperative environment with the UDRC, involves us, USHE, Department of Health, UWS, UCAT, the technology schools. All of these organizations will make sure that you first of all, or decide what research you feel would benefit us most at a decision-making level, state level, and then what data elements you would like to see incorporated into those research projects. So there is opportunity to have these discussions. This agenda item is specific to your support of moving grant money towards or with Department of Health in support of where it's at right now. It doesn't mean we can't in the future change it, does it? I mean, we can always incorporate that. So,
with regards to the early childhood integrated data system, in order for us to match these different records, we do collect the parent demographics, first, last name, address, things of that nature. And in order to produce those reports, the distinct count reports, and to be able to line up with the USBE record, we do have to collect that PII. With regards to reporting, that's where we show participated in programs, what order, what sequence, and with regards to research, what was the impact of that early intervention. Now, in this proposal, it also talks about a community assessment tool, an early childhood Utah community assessment tool. And at this moment in time, that's funded by Kellogg through the University of Pennsylvania. Now that tool, that'll be on Tableau, and that's more of a public view. Public can get on there and see. And what we'll have right now is 0 to 5 population, poverty, race and ethnicity, things of that nature, risk factors at birth, low birth weight, prematurity, services that are available in an area. Now, we can get it. Now, the Department of Health, we have a surveillance program, and there's no reason why, and especially a lot of that data that you're talking about, does a child live, is it a single home? Is it a two-parent home? Is one parent working? Are both parents working? That is very valuable data, and that data is available publicly through census and different organizations that collect that kind of population level data. Now, with our community assessment tool, over time, this particular proposal doesn't speak to gathering that specific data and then making it visible. But there's no reason. That's exactly why we have both of these tools. eKids, it's more of a service level data, and those reports are protected. You have to have authorized access to get into the reports because you can filter down by zip code and race, ethnicity, and gender, and these different services. So you can really get down to a granular level. Of course, it's still aggregated, and there's small cell size suppression. Now, this other tool is for exactly what you just spoke of. What kind of data can we get from census or from the Department of Health Public Health Assessment Office that really shows on a larger level and speaks to poverty, population, race, ethnicity, and exactly what you said. One parent, two parent, one working, both working. That is very valuable data. And so we're creating basically a template. We're creating a highway to be able to add those things over time.
Mark and then Linda.
I have a couple questions. Going through your proposal, I'm looking at the dollar section here, and I see where you have like FTEs 11 months. So I've got 11 months in my head. Then I go to the proposal further up on the high-level timeline, and it said it'll be completed by September 30th. Then in an addendum, the other attachment on that addendum shows a 6-month window. So I'm just curious.
No, I can
when does
explain
it
that.
start?
Right.
When does it end?
We're hoping to be able to finish these tasks by the end of next September. We were hoping to be able to execute this contract, November. So that would give us, 11 months. What I can predict, it's going to take several months to get the contracts in such an order. So the actual programming would take place between April and then by the end of September.
And I'm a little bit, if we go back to the cost proposal, so while you're getting the contract in place, you have an FTE for 11 months, and the crunch time is 6 months, and you're getting it'll be a contractor on board. So that had me a little bit confused. But I just saw a little conflict.
There's some things in place that we can
open dollars on this, and so
there's some things in place that we can begin to expend those funds as soon as the contracts are executed. Sorry, and I was hopeful that hopefully we have the whole month of November to be able to get this passed by your committee as well as the board, and be able to get the contracts going between USBE and Department of Health. And then
this isn't going to go before our board until December for approval. So I'm just working the timeline.
Yeah, we might need to make some adjustments there.
Expectations in this, so those are my concerns.
Scott and Linda?
If I may clarify with Mr. Huntsman's concern or question, absolutely. What we're trying to do is make sure we get this in front of you here, so that when the December board meeting comes up, we can put everything together for the decision-making process by the full board. Subject to your recommendation coming out today, yes, the timeline would likely get adjusted accordingly. So to whatever the board decides, we would never speculate or make any kind of assumptions. We know the process. Albert and we explained it. Yes, it'll go before the full board. So to your point, this can be adjusted though, based on if the board should approve it, then we can adjust the timeline, sir.
So that would be great. So I'm not sure if we approve the full proposal because it doesn't have those details in it, but the intent is I'm very, very supportive of.
What we're seeking is your recommendation to the board to allow the direction of $300,000 to support this, subject to their review. We did want to put the proposal in front so you could get the scope of why we're requesting and how we feel the $300,000.
I think the devil's in the details, and I think I'm going to need Whitney for this. So it is de-identified, right? But we are giving him PII. They said we were. They're going to have.
Join us at the table. Could you allow?
They're going to have parents' information and information on kids. Certainly, they would have to have if they're going to match them up in programs, which programs are which, and children are going to which programs. You'd have to have PII, right? Hi, Whitney.
This is how I understand it, and so they might have to correct me. Oh, sorry, Whitney Phillips, Chief Privacy Officer here at the Utah State Board of Education. This is how I understand it, and how I understand it is that right now, you're not going to collect any more data. Kids.
Not from us.
We are not
non-school district, non-LEA, non-school data.
And from what I understand, what you're talking about with UDRC is in the future, not this.
Correct.
This is a step towards that potential matching at UDRC, but right now this is just for finishing the display with Tableau and making that available
but that we're not going to be giving you any PII for this.
E-Kids and the Department of Health will not be receiving any data from schools or the LEAs. We're collecting non-LEA early education and early care data.
Right.
And due
But
to
you're
the
still doing early education data, right?
such as Head Start, correct? And
But no preschool.
not a preschool that would be operated by an LEA.
We have a lot of preschools that are being operated.
Right. So no, this is Department of Health early care and education data that fall anything that falls outside of the auspices of the SEA and the LEA, and then so our goal is to collect that other sets of data, like from programs such as Head Start, early Head Start, home visiting, and then yes, part of the legislation for UDRC is for the Department of Health to participate in UDRC.
But that is not the purpose of this.
Correct.
UDRC.
Yes. Right now, I think.
Just tell me what it is.
This is
Utah
how.
Data Research Center that was passed last in 2017, and it's created which is a consolidation of all the data from USBE, USHE, UTAC, and the Workforce Services UI information, basically.
And I think what Steve was talking about is something that they want to do in the future. That they would like to eventually get that PII from us and from them and have that matched in UDRC. Whether the board approves that, whether we do that, it's written in legislation, Senator Andrick's bill to create the Utah Data Research Center, which is housed and managed Department of Workforce Services. But for this, we are not going to give any PII for this purpose. I think he sees this as a step maybe in that direction, but that's not what this is yet.
Yeah, I don't anticipate Department of Health or eKids would ever receive data that is LEA data. We're hopeful to be able to eventually send our data to Utah Data Research Center. That's not your data.
Follow up. So let me ask you this: if you're researching early childhood, and you're not picking up our preschool data from the LEAs, isn't that a gap in your research? I'm just wondering.
That would fall to what Whitney just spoke of, actually. That would fall to USBE to decide what sets of pre-K data that falls under the SEA and the LA to send to UDRC. I can represent the Department of Health. And our intentions and what this database is designed to do is to complement that process. But ultimately, this State Board of Education will decide what type of data is going to Utah Data Research Center, and that's more appropriate for Albert and others to speak to.
So that basically is my question, is how they're going to safeguard the data. But if we're not going to give them any data, then I'm not as concerned about it. But I expect this to be a conversation that we'll have at the board level.
A little further clarification. So I think we've hit the nail right on the head. Right? What we're doing is we're asking for you, the Finance Committee, to make a recommendation to the board to support using $300,000 out of the statewide longitudinal data system funding for this purpose that ties into the overall Utah Data Research Center, right? Where, as I stated earlier, as we progress together with the UDRC, you as the board will identify particular research projects that may involve the combination of what's data's in this system with LEA level data, but under your supervision and your approval too. So this is part of basically a tool or a system that makes up the overall potential for you as the board to determine what research projects you want, where it would be inclusive of some of the data elements that you're talking about in order to arrive at particular reports that may prove useful to you from a decision making.
That's right. We're a branch of that tree.
And if I may, it's an acceptable use of the funding. The grant is controlled by controlled by us basically by we're making sure that we're very transparent about the use of the funds and what that could mean at the initial level, which they're presenting today, but holistically it will mean both in here and
Kathleen?
So my understanding is we're pretty much already collecting all this data. We're just not connecting the dots from preschool to early education situations. And it would be nice to see pre-K and K in there, but since it's not mandatory, it's kind of hard to capture that information. So that creates a kind of a weird variable because pre-K is not mandatory and it's not statewide. So is that why we're not capturing that maybe?
Well, legislation has been passed basically for what we call here USBE PEEP and KEEP.
Okay.
And the idea is we will be pushing this data out to UDRC where it will be logically linked. Or to say it in such a way to satisfy some of our legislature's requests for data. We hold a part of it, and they hold a part of it, and at UDRC, which is they will link everything logically speaking and identify, and so that researchers and anybody who needs to look at farming research will be able to make sense of it and recommendations and policy. That's the whole purpose of all this exercise, I'll call it, because that's why we have the SLDS system.
So right now it's pretty much anecdotally, and we want to try to connect them more scientifically.
We have connected them before under UDA, and we are connecting them right now, reconnecting because of legislation passed. We have to move from one service provider to another service provider. So we are. The only thing new is basically the Department of Health. There are sets of data. It's a whole lot of data that they are still debating which set to share with the SLDS program, so to speak. And some of the data that we might hope to collect in the future based on what we're investing for.
I make a motion to recommend approval to the USBE to fund this proposal using $300,000 from the SLDS grant.
Further discussion?
Just one, and so that we're clear, we're going to fund the proposal, but the proposal, how I see it, needs a little tweaking before it goes.
we'll make those tweaks before the board meeting. And we appreciate Board Member Hansen's articulation of the fact that a lot more questions are probably going to occur. Process. We're into the process. We'll make sure we get it.
My comment is I'll vote to pass this on to the full board, but I'm not going to vote for anything that measures racial data without family data going forward. I just feel it really exacerbates and causes negative impacts. The ACT scores statewide came out recently, and the whole Deseret News article was just on the racial gap for ACT scores, which really seemed to promote a message that we are racist in Utah and we treat people differently. I just think that's so misleading. And I think data on whether you're living with your birth parents or whether you have two parents in the home, how many work, how many parents you have in the home, will be a much better indicator. And so I don't think this data is being used in a healthy way. So that's my message.
Are you suggesting that we perhaps adapt this proposal to collect that type of data from programs that collect it? I mean, we can only collect what the early childhood programs also collect. So there may be some programs that collect that data as regards to single parent or two parents, and then we might be able to collect that data from early childhood programs that receive that data into the system. Is that
I'll probably need some assurances that that's going to be part of it to vote for it at the full board. I mean, you might still get the 8 votes and be fine, but I'm just done supporting this hyper focus on race, which I just think is counterproductive. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Want to see if you want on the consent?
Oh.
without any.
For council. I think it would just get pulled off.
Yeah.
I think
I don't
Linda's,
have any problem, but I've got to take the.
it's a really good question, Mark. I appreciate you. Yeah, let's put it on the, let's not pull it.
Staff recommends a separate agenda item just based on by Department of Health back.
Starting at 7 a.m. December full board meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Jones, 1.5.
Chair, 1.5 is the board budget and board discretionary funding requests. As I articulated during the monthly budget report, actually, if you will, Chair, we invite Deborah Jacobson, our finance director, up to the table. She may have to answer some questions here or make sure I don't say anything I'm not supposed to say. Yesterday during the board meeting, I drew all the board members' attention to the upper right-hand corner of your discretionary funds report. Any balances, it's displayed behind you on the screens, or you can pull the first report up in board docs. What we're seeking by way of this agenda item is a favorable recommendation from the Finance Committee on the proposals we have here for use of these funds. They are acceptable use of these funds that we're proposing to you, especially in light of the unrestricted state funds, the general funds, and the research and development centric requirements for use of federal mineral lease funds. The first item in the back, which is of course the report that you all saw yesterday. Again, the remaining balance is in the upper right-hand corner. The second document is just a presentation of the proposals. With this particular, so the proposal is along the lines of use of the three fund sources: state funds, general funds, and the federal mineral lease discretionary balances. All of these are discretionary; they're at your disposal or the board's disposal, as long as they meet acceptable uses. So staff respectfully request from the state funds discretionary balance a continuing use of those funds for capital improvements. In that amount there of $603,725.61. That would leave a remaining balance of $400,000. Staff further recommends for those funds that we do keep that $400,000 balance there. Is the Finance Committee members will likely recall, we've increased a lot of the meeting times for our board members. You had directed us, the staff, to ensure that, at least in this initial first year, we track the expenditure rate based on those meetings or commitments that board members have. This being the first year where we've seen that accelerated involvement of the board members, we would like to keep that $400,000 just to make sure that we meet our obligations to the board members in support of your commitments to your constituents. And the next one would be the general fund balance, discretionary balance. We request that it's a small amount, $13,855.90. Just for the first year of coming out of the school fees task force, that whatever personnel is identified and brought on to carry forward quite a bit, the intent of the school fees task force or what's produced out of that be placed into their travel budget. Now, I will say, because Natalie and Deborah will not be happy if I don't, that we do have a plan for funding that was already approved for support of the school fees task force. Can remind me of the amount? About $600,000. But we'd just like to put this in specifically for travel. We may not need the whole $600,000. We would keep the board updated on the execution of those dollars specific to what the staff related to school fees needs to do, training, LEA visitation, things like that. The next one is use of the federal mineral lease discretionary balance, which currently is at $1,296,652.77. We request that we move that budget over under the control of the Chief of Staff, Tiffany Stanley, for development of, and you can always look at the title change to this, but we named it Strategic Communications Research and Development. Putting that at $596,652.77. That would make a remaining balance of $700,000. We further request that of that $700,000, we move $500,000 into the IT budget for further information technology, research and development, implementation, training, monitoring. Later on, we're going to talk about the USIMS proposal. If you were to approve this or make a favorable recommendation to the board to approve what we've proposed here to you, once the board ratified it, then we would reduce any future requests that we've made as part of your budget proposal for the USIM system, which currently stands at $17,200,000 by $500,000. That will leave, subject to the recommendation of the Finance Committee and approval by the full board, that would make a remaining balance of $200,000. This concludes the proposal of the staff to you, the Finance Committee, for use of these funds. They're discretionary, they're at your disposal. These are our ideas subject to your questions or concerns.
Any comments?
And maybe I'm not looking at enough of the detail, but this just isn't enough detail for me. For example, request for capital improvements, is that somewhere in another document?
Yes. I'm sorry, thank you.
Thank you. So that I can see
right.
exactly what we're doing here with it.
Yep. Sorry, I should have pulled that up. It's visible on the screen now. There's some details there. As far as the communication and strategic budget goes, we don't have any past expenditure or information, so we've detailed to you what the intent or the use would be. For instance, for example, the hiring of a PR firm, I don't have any, we don't have any cost data to provide to you, but that's the best or the level of detail we could give you until we get, estimate or bids. We put bids out and things like that. We would come back and make sure that's detailed in the monthly budget.
So I want to be careful here because this is taxpayer money and we need to be mindful of that. So when we look at the capital improvement discretionary request, someone could explain to me why the IT space needs to be redesigned and what needs to be done in the restrooms. That would be helpful.
Okay, so Chair, we called Director Felt to the table. He can speak to the IT space redesign. Cami is our facility monitor engineer / so she needs to speak to the bathroom piece of it. There's some history, some background. So let me tee the bathroom question off first, and Cami, you correct me if I'm wrong. DHRM actually has a budget to assist us with the refurbishment of the restrooms. The additional $100,000, is it? Yeah, $100,000 is, why is that?
So it's actually DFCM, and
Or
it's
DFCM, sorry.
capital improvement requests that they get for our facility each year. At the time that they bid this, the explosion of costs of construction was not an issue. So that would have covered it had it been approved at the time that it was requested. The additional $100,000 is to complete all 6 restrooms this year so that we don't have to do it over. So it's just to address that additional cost of what construction has increased.
Subject to your recommendation to the board and the board's ratification in December, the restroom timeline would be roughly January through April.
And they won't cover that $100,000. Why?
Because it's not in their budget.
It's not in their budget. If I may, Chair. To answer Board Member Hansen's question, it goes to what Cami articulated. Costs have skyrocketed. The hurricanes, material prices have just gone up. So it's a timing aspect. Those budgets were set several months ago, and now as we get closer and we get the the cost estimates, we're seeing the sheer price. I mean, it's incredible. how much materials have gone through the roof. Because a lot of materials are going to Houston, Florida, all the places that were struck with the hurricanes, and competition here within Utah. Construction. Yesterday, earlier this week, we met with DFCM. They were saying that contractors are coming in and making high bids because they have so much opportunity out there. It's yeah. So this is specific to your question about the $100,000. That's why.
So we'd have to wait and have them put it in their budget again if we wanted to do
We
it
would.
and not have to pay for
Yes, ma'am.
ourselves.
And then we won't know what prices are at that time. They could even be considerably higher. Jobs report came out today. The economy seems to be booming by all indications. There's no end in sight, so we could conceivably experience even higher estimates. So we're seeking to get these. A lot of it does pertain to ADA accommodations too, and the restrooms meet the standards for the ADA piece of this. So there is a need for this, and so specific to the restrooms, that's why we're asking for the increase of $100,000. Subject to any further questions on the restrooms, can we defer to Director Felt to answer the board member Hanson's question on the IT space redesign?
Jared Felt, IT Director. So right now we're anticipating growth for the USIMS project, temporary growth. And right now the space is configured not efficiently. I mean, there's high-walled cubicles. They're large. We're putting one person in them. We've already torn out the walls on the east side. It's a dark and dreary place to work. And so that's why we're reconfiguring. We've had Hendricks and Butler and a couple other consultants come in and redesign the space to be more efficient, to fit the most amount of people and give them a good work environment. So a lot of the chairs we're sitting in are 15 years old. So that's the reason.
Chair, if there's questions or if you'd like, if you'd invite the Chief of Staff, Tiffany Stanley, forward, she can talk a little bit more about the communications proposal. If the committee needs to answer questions or ask questions about that specific or those specific requirements.
I'd like to hear.
Up, Tiffany. State your name and just for everyone to know, we have microphones here and we record this, so it's important. That's why we always have it, even though I certainly know who Tiffany is.
Tiffany Stanley, Chief of Staff. So these are some of the uses for this line item. Essentially, the objective for this would be to promote the board's strategic plan and to assert the board's leadership as, the director of, public education in Utah. And so some of the uses would be to contract with a public relations firm to assist with the rollout of the board's strategic plan. That would help to identify key messages that resonate. It's sometimes difficult to do that when you're on the inside, so that outside lens can be really valuable. And then some of the other uses would be to procure software to manage and monitor implementation of the board's strategic plan among staff, as well as to provide visibility to the board on the actions that are being taken to implement. Another action would be to contract with ethnographic interviews to highlight school success stories and best practices that reinforce key aspects of the board's strategic plan. Storytelling is a really, really powerful form of communication, and that methodology is valuable in the board's strategic plan. Also printing and procuring materials and collateral, including wall displays for the mission, vision, goals, targets, some great data visualizations and posters and things like that around the office. See the rest there. Contract with public opinion polling to benchmark opinions, track changes in perception over time, see how the messages are resonating. Contract with evaluators to assess the impact of strategically relevant initiatives. So these are some of the
Kathleen?
So right now I have the awesome opportunity of running for another office. And as I walk around, people are very upset because we spend so much money of our budget, our state budget, on education, and they feel like it's not transparent. I think this is a great way for us to start building relationships with our public and to also increase our transparency. Our constituents have no idea what we do up here. They're really confused about our mission, our vision, and as we found out in legislative session last year, they don't even know who we are. So I think this is a really great proactive step. As a teacher and somebody who works in a school and has to maintain Facebook pages and web pages and Twitter accounts, it seems ridiculous that people aren't coming to us and asking us questions because it is such a large piece of the budget. But the fact of the matter is, when we push it out and we explain it, it saves a lot of time from people reacting negatively to it. So I've seen this be a benefit at a local level as we reach out to parents and we build our relationships and the trust increases. So I think this is a really good use.
Yeah, I'm just troubled. I mean, this feels kind of like campaigning. We're elected now. I don't know. I appreciate that's how the world works in some ways too. Can you say anything to make me more comfortable with this?
So I think, you know, being able to reach out to constituents and be clear about what it is that the board, the value that the board provides and what the board does is more about education than campaigning, actually, is a way to look at it.
I don't think this is promoting the board. I think it's actually educating our public on how we're using their money. And right now, there's so much confusion about what's going on in this building. And it's not whether I'm sitting here or you're sitting here, it's what this institution is doing to promote education. So whether it's assessments or reaching out to young kids or expanding a program to benefit a demographic, I think that people should understand that we are not just, you know, throwing money around, but we actually have a targeted goal. And to educate people about that builds trust. And so I don't look at it as campaigning. I look at it as educating and creating relationships with our constituents, because relationships are really important. When somebody hands you your kid, they want to know that they have a relationship with you. And I don't think we have that right now. Where, as I sit in meetings as a teacher and we say USBE, it's like a curse word. So it would be nice if we were thought of as benevolent, U.S. Benevolent Education Association. But it's not a good relationship right now. So I think that the misunderstanding with SAGE and the misunderstanding with some of the things we've done has really been a detriment to us and to moving our plans forward. So a little education and a little explanation, I think, would help us further our causes without reactiveness.
I'm going to say it publicly. We needed this when we took on the Utah High School Athletic Association, you know, over 2 years ago. I'm Kathleen, but we really needed this. We just got torched on social media and in the press. And then when we dared to give junior highs more freedom to choose their electives, we also got scorched. I mean, our friends at the UEA just scorched us. It was really bad, and we pulled it back some, unfortunately, in my opinion. So I think we need them to help us with this, and I hope they're also available that once we do, you know, if the board does make some bold decisions, they're out there kind of fighting for those. Because, I mean, I don't know, Salt Lake Tribune doesn't care enough to cover us anymore. Bad. By some of both. All right, well, I have reservations. I'll just pass it on to the full board. I still need to think about this more. Further discussion? Promotion. Oh, Tiffany, you have something?
Oh, just one other thought potentially is that the hope would be with the strategic plan and communicating it appropriately that you would see more alignment, right? Because one of the things that we're trying to accomplish is, you know, the board sets its priorities and then we rally alignment around those priorities and we rally focus toward, you know, what you're trying to accomplish. And if we don't adequately communicate what those are, then it's likely to happen on the strategic plan aspect of it.
Kind of trying to shepherd, 15 grizzly bears at a time. Hard. All on the same page. Maybe the next board will be instructing everyone now. Any further comments?
So many, but I don't choose to share them now.
I was elected through the commoner system, so I'm proud of that.
I'd like to make the motion that the committee, is there a motion that we need here?
Need to clarify one thing.
Okay.
If you'll refer back to the proposal, which is on the slide, where I say that there's a remaining balance of $200,000. Earlier, I stated a budget of $600,000 for school fees. That $200,000 is part of that $600,000, correct? Most of it, $140,000. I should have done another line there that says of that $200,000, $140,000 will also go to school fees task force team configuration.
So that was approved in the spend plan in the carryover that you did last month. We didn't use the regular discretionary form because we also used the we also used the $108,000 here from the dedicated credits to fund that 600, and then there was $349,000 that was sitting in one-time funds in the financial ops budget that was used for that purpose. So that was already approved yesterday in the main board meeting. We just wanted to make sure that you knew that that $200,000 really won't be left when we're all finished.
Which is why on the slide you don't see the dedicated credits. Why I didn't make that because it's already been approved towards the school fees task. The land exchange item, by way of the code, and Deborah can speak to this, we're having a hard time really kind of determining what is an acceptable use of that land exchange money. The code is, I don't know, not specific enough maybe?
Broad and restrictive all at the same time.
We'll come back to you on that.
That was going to be my question, is we've been brainstorming potential uses of those funds and potentially brainstorming a request to ask for a one-time exception from the law to expend those dollars. The money that comes in the land exchange is like $7,000 or $8,000 a year. It's not enough to do anything. This is the accumulation of quite a while.
Yeah.
So we might potentially, we haven't formalized that yet, but we might make a request to get approval from the legislature to change the purpose or do like a one-time exception for a project so that we can expend those funds.
Hopefully that clarifies and doesn't confuse.
Any further?
I'd like to make a motion to send these recommendations to the full board. Want to put it on the consent calendar, or do we want to put it on the line item? I think this could be a consent item thing. Board Member Hanson?
Well, I'm not going to vote in favor.
Okay, so I guess I won't make it on the consent calendar.
Comfortable with it yet, so.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? No. I think that moves it along even with 2 votes. So we need 3 votes.
I think you have to have 3 to make it.
Can we vote on it again when Mark comes back?
It's read it and is familiar.
Here I concur. You need to have
Of the committees.
of the 5, 3 out of 5.
All right, well, that fails. We'll discuss with Mark maybe at the break and see if the ring comes back.
Okay.
Deputy Jones?
Here's what I'd also respectfully request of the Finance Committee members. If this does go forward, and then if the board doesn't ratify it, staff are making the recommendations. We would have ideas on where to execute this funding. If you want to move it down, these balances are considerable balances, and so the recommendations that we make to you, and that's fine. If you don't want to see it used for these purposes, we're open to any ideas from the board members on how to use it, or even from the public if they want to, provide ideas or, that are acceptable uses of, like FML as research and development type activities. We'll put those together. My concern is with balances like this, if we don't execute them in a manner appropriate within the categories, we could end up reductions in budget, or want to just throw that out.
Okay. With that, I think it probably makes sense with Mark on to probably move the items 1.8 and 1.9 possible, and then when Mark returns to circle back to concerns members. Okay, so let's move to 1.8.
Chair, 1.8 is further development by way of information and discussion of the Utah Schools Information Management System. If you'll invite Director Felt and Deputy Director Chuma up to the table. The first document that you see in the backups is the project strategy, which has been in front of the board, placed in front of the board. This committee is in September? August. So we won't spend too much time there. What we'd like you to do, though, is review and discuss some more details that Chair Huntsman had asked for by way of this committee on the particular spend plan, where the dollars would go towards this if the legislature were to approve, and we're optimistic or hopeful. So Jacob Wright, if you're listening to me, that this will be part of the governor's budget proposal as well, because it will make everlasting and long-term good and great support of the individual student throughout the state. This is the more detailed spend plan that was requested of us from last month. If you'll recall, last month we really just provided the strategy. Director Felt spoke to that. So this is provided for your review, discussion. Again, we didn't make this an action item because we were developing this. Again, it's in front of or was part of your overall budget proposal to the governor's office. The other document that we added in here is we get questions quite a bit on, well, what will this solve? What is USIMS as a solution? We've tried to capture some of the higher end, and most of this is specific to these ongoing discussions about student information systems. Different states have taken different approaches. You have some states that have gone to a vendor, and all of the LEAs in those respective states are all in one student information system. You have other states where, and this is more along the lines of the direction we're heading, subject to being, you guys need to correct me, other states such as, like, say, Georgia, places like that, Texas, where LEAs have all different types of student information systems as we do. So based on all the input we got from the field, all that, they don't want us to disrupt or necessarily move them all into one system. So what we're doing is we're having a bridging strategy here. The bridging strategy, or USIMS, is in support of that bridging strategy. It still will involve LEAs. It will still, the LEAs would be impacted. I would never say that they wouldn't be, but they would be less impacted had we have gone or pursued a strategy of everyone, all for one, and one for all in one student information system. So just at a high level for now, these are some of the problems we've identified, both with internally and externally with stakeholders. Here's some of the solutions. Not all. I wanted to just kind of keep this in a discussion type information process or manner with you here today. One thing I'd dry out on some of the solutions is there's been talk, Board Member Stokes brought this up a couple meetings ago, about how there's this, which goes to Chief of Staff Stanley's point about communication. The legislature, if I understood what Board Member Stokes there's a feeling that we haven't done or implemented what we needed to do. One example is I believe it was in 2012, was the intention by legislation to create a student backpack, which would involve one log-on for anyone to use to go in and get all of that information. I won't go into all the details about what exactly is in the backpack. We feel that USIMS would actually get us there. That the ability for the data exchange and the bridging that occurs with the existing systems within the EPAs should this get funded, would bring us over the top, so to speak, and get us to that back in the 2012 legislation. Finally, the last slide is the data life cycle. We've had questions about data, what the life cycle is for it, what USIMS would involve with this for you for further review and expansion. We did get a lot of questions, rightfully so, from the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. We have another meeting with them this week. When I say we, me, the superintendent, I'm not sure beyond us yet who else will be there with the Governor's Office of Management and Budget to explain the $17.2 million ask for or towards the USIM system. So Jared and Schumer are here for further discussion, information, questions you might have as we seek solutions that are meaningful to both our stakeholders and the LEAs.
Kathleen.
So I was part of this discussion before where our LEAs are not super excited about this at certain points. They want a bridge. We have 2 BAs sitting in the audience right now, don't we? And 3? And so it's frustrating at a school level to be told what you need to do when that's not what you want to do. And so I want to honor that. Like, how are we facilitating this to go to our schools? And if our schools don't really want this, and it's going to be a problem, like, how are we bridging this successfully? Or I've heard about it in my district and in the district I represent that it's coming, and sometimes it's coming in a good way, like Christmas, and sometimes it's coming like tax day. So I want to try to mitigate that feeling a little bit. And so because I use this system and I am part of these problems, but I'm also part of these solutions every day, I want to understand how we are doing that. And then when I look at our spreadsheet and the money that's being spent, the spend plan, it's very robust. And so as we move into year 3, all the columns are filled and every box has a dollar amount on it. Does it? And then I see in year 4 it tapers off again. So does it taper off further after we get to year 5 because we've done all the work in year 3 and 4? Because this is year 3 is it's very, very, very intense. So those are my concerns and questions.
Jared Felt, IT Director, USBE. So to answer your question, as Scott's mentioned, we're given the LEAs autonomy on the systems that they use, and with that bridging system, now it's going to function similar to how it does now. So through an API, they will connect to our data systems and send the information that they need to send up to us. And going to the spreadsheet, so we're gonna obviously ramp up with. We've got to sustain what we've got right now. The back end infrastructure is what really needs to change here. It's not really on the LEA side, although it will impact them hopefully for the better as we transition them over to the USIMS system. But once we ramp down on year 4, year 3.5, then we're going to sustain with what our current IT budget is. So we don't anticipate any additional costs after this one-time ask.
So to further that detail, the point we're trying to make is if upon receipt of the $17.2 million, perhaps less, subject to proposals for use of like FML and all that too, that we might discuss again further later in this committee meeting, we fall back to our manning and budget levels after there's this roughly 3.5 year process, right? So that's why we're seeking a one-time appropriation, non-lapsing, of course, because then, progressively over the 3.5 years, we get to what right looks like. Come back down to our current manning levels and what the IT budget. That's an important piece. We're not seeking, ongoing 17.2 million. We're just focused on a 3.5 year plan to get our infrastructure corrected and modernized to facilitate shorter real-time abilities to provide visibility on the data that's being brought in. Less of manual procedures, like i.e., an LEA just saying, well, here's the spreadsheet, and then our staff having to go, just as an example, our staff having to go through said spreadsheets, hours of commitments towards those, to become more automated. So you can probably see a trend here. We show you the progress and the recognition of the MSP automation that's occurring. The bulk of that has been managed and monitored in spreadsheets which are subject to higher levels of error, or, until if Jamie walked out the door, I'd walk out with her, right? Because it's just that we're trying to get to modernize system so that in relation to what was proposed to you for the strategic communications plan, that we have that real-time availability of data to support the message, right? ACT scores, Sybil scores are up. Here it is. It's all been brought into this place. It's been controlled, inventoried, if you will, tested. One piece of that overall ability to do so. Hope that helps.
So Scott, explain to me why this is adequate, or are we getting a Lincoln when a Chevy will do?
We're getting.
That's what I need to know.
Yeah, by no means do I feel that the 17.2 million or the Lincoln. It's going to be a usable transportation vehicle, whether you call it Chevy, Ford, or Durango, Dodge Durango. That's about where we're at here. This is not. We're trying to be very considerate and of taxpayer dollars, of the efficiencies that will be gained from this, and not trying to overextend ourselves into this will just, this is the utopia of all data systems. As you recall, I've made several proposals, or, talked specifically about how much it would take to have the Lincoln or the Mercedes of data systems, because, I've seen what millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, can give you in a data system or a financial system or a combination of all those systems thereof. So now I'd like to defer to Jared and Chuma to further answer your question, subject to the chairs going through the chair.
As far as the Lincoln goes, yeah, I wouldn't consider this a Lincoln luxury type application. I would look at it in the Chevy realm. I'd look at it as like an overhaul of what we have today. I mean, systems today, we presented the Jenga to you guys some time ago, the Jenga tower, and what we have right now is we have an unsustainable architecture. So every time there's a change in legislation, whether it be federal, state, or any board rules, anytime we're trying to do new data collections, that requires a heavy lift. So it actually costs more today to do systems modifications than what would be needed under if we restructured this whole system. Essentially today, the way that we look at things, we look at when we're pulling in new data, right? We don't look at things from like an object attribute perspective. For example, what do we collect here at USBE? What kind of data do we gather every day at USBE? The data that we gather is centered around students. It's centered around teachers, and it's centered around the LEAs and their associated schools, right? But we build systems that grab the attributes that are associated with those objects. And so when we do that, we're spending a lot of money to build systems that grab attributes instead of grabbing those core objects. In addition to that, as Board Member Reby was talking about here, it complicates things with the LEAs, right? Because then we go back to the LEAs and we're like, hey, provide us this data, but then we don't really explain to them how they need to provide us this data. And then we say, hey, use this system in conjunction with this system and this system to provide these 3 data sets. They're like, well, I already kind of provide some of that over here. I provide this flavor over here, and then provide that flavor over here, and all this is supposed to come together, and those are the challenges we have. So what this would do, as I'm saying here, is we would keep that Jenga going. We'd rebuild something new that's more modern, 21st century looking object here, and what we'd be doing is grabbing those objects and their attributes. In addition to that, this new system would be flexible to any changes that you requested. If you wanted new data objects, if you wanted new attributes collected, we can make those changes without having to spend millions of dollars. It should be simple. It should be something that's associated with the objects that we already collect. In addition to that, if we had any new objects that we needed to collect to, this actual structure we'd be able to modify without asking for millions of dollars. It would be able to be modified under the sustainment budget, if that makes sense. So that's where we're going there.
So to kind of add some context to what Schumann was saying, right now when the board wants us to gather something new, or if the legislature passes a bill or is looking to pass a bill, as we write a fiscal note, we're having to anticipate how much it will cost to modify this system, and this system in order to gather like one new thing. And I know most of you have probably had some pushback from legislators on fiscal notes. Why does it cost so much to add one stupid little thing? Under the USIMS plan, like Chuma indicated, if we build the right structure, it's fairly easy to add one new attribute instead of having to add a whole new collection system. Right now our LEAs respond to survey monkeys and all sorts of different ways that we collect data. We have consistency issues, we have accuracy issues. So building an infrastructure we can sustain and build upon long-term will actually reduce the fiscal impact, I believe, on the legislature and on implementing new laws. It's not always a guarantee. It depends on how impactful it is and what the items are. But right now we're having to fix 3 or 4 things instead of just adding a little box or adding a text box, which for most people, they look at us and think, how could this be this difficult, right? And it's because we're duct taping things together.
And Jared?
So to further provide evidence, the evidence relies on audits. Director Davis is here from the internal audit. I think if you brought her forward, she would attest that we're seeing the trend in the audits, which is related to potentially non-accurate data, difficulties in ensuring that the data submissions are controlled. I can't go into too much detail about the upcoming release of the OIG, Office of the Inspector General, audit on our graduation rates because it's not made public yet. We have made our response, but it's subject to their review. I just really feel that there's even further evidence, even outside of your own staff, that would indicate the need to progress towards a modern system, a 21st century ability that would translate to reduction in time spent by your own staff and LEA staff on what Chuma articulated as redundant requests for data and information. Wanted to add.
I'll just add. Oh, sorry.
Jared and then Mark.
Just real quick, this doesn't just affect IT. This affects the entire agency. A part of the plan is to have business process analysts to work with the stakeholders to reimagine how we do things here, and then build the system around what right looks like. So it's not just IT saying, hey, this is what we think right looks like. This is Travis Rawlings. This is the LEAs working with us on how we do business. And so I just wanted to add that.
I really appreciated you guys' work on this, and I think one thing that would be helpful and not to reinvent anything, but this is for our board, this is for our legislative acts, this is for our internal sections, and that on this, we know we have these dinosaurs and we know we have a problem. The question is, how do we address the problem? And one thing that I think might help us totally as a board, because not everyone has the same intellect as Board Member Reby and on computers and all the accounting pieces that Board Member Hanson has. But we are literally a receiving and shipping entity here. And IT is, and everything we're talking about is our routing and storage, period. If we keep it that simple. On the shipping side, we give all these submissions to different entities, and they're all, from federal, state, and the list goes on, all of our grants, all these different things that we have going on. So we're in this submission business, and this is all of you. Somebody said at one time when I ran that we're in the education business. Today we're not really talking about that, though betterments can come from education with a really good system that's in place. And so I'm curious how difficult it would be to kind of modify use an architect on this that says that we're in the business of all of this has to go out. It's mind-blowing, and there's a reality to it. And it has to go out in a certain way, and we're seeking efficiencies. And then at the same time, inventory how all of our inputs on the receiving side are coming to us. And somewhere in the middle is all of the production processing that happens within all of our entities where IT is dealing with the routing. I'm trying to keep it really simple. But it's bigger when we see these numbers and we see the arrows and the flow charts and everything. It kind of blows you away that it seems too simple, because all we got to do is move this arrow over to here, spend $2 million or $10 million or $5 million, and it gets it fixed. And so maybe my suggestion might be, I'm open. Finance committee is as we're rolling forward and trying to bring these betterments, somehow have that be always out in front. And I know it'd be helpful for me to have that when I'm talking with legislators and that of really the magnitude of what's being required of all of our section people here. And it also will help with our LEAs as they're trying to give their inputs and the quality of that board. It could be quantities. There's all sorts of things that we can inventory that's on the submission side to help us as board members, all the board members, totally understand that we're just a little bit more than setting some policies now and again and a lot of policy, that we're just more than the policy. There's this accountability piece that we have to a lot of people. So I'm off my soapbox, but I'm just wondering if the committee members have any input on. I'm not sure how that should be requested, but better. I have a grasp on it, and I'm not sure if the full board.
I'm kind of curious. Do we have a representative from the BAs that could speak for all of the BAs? And maybe I know we've heard it from them before, but I don't want to give somebody a hammer when they really want a screwdriver, and that's my frustration. And I think this is a great plan, and I really like that it's going to make things easier. But I struggle with local control versus state control, and I don't want to make the point worse, but I'd also like to represent fairly.
Representing 41 districts fairly. So my name is Todd Auber. I'm the business administrator for Park City School District and the legislative liaison for USBE. been in these conversations for a while. We talked about what the best approach would be. The one system or system. That time was that we have so many different systems in place that it would be a money task to get us all into one place. So we really encourage the idea of having a bridge system put in place. So we're willing to work with that. What is it that we can do on our side to help that bridge work? Answers that people are looking for. We're very interested. We want to help. I don't know that we're ready to go to a single system, and so we want to.
Thank you so much.
So Todd, thank you. I do want to point out for the good of the group too. Todd is speaking from probably a perspective of 41 school districts. We also have charter schools. And this is the thing too, if you bring up business officials from charter schools, might say, well, I don't have the capacity that say like an Alpine does. So we're also considerate of those entities as well. Because at your level, you're also responsible for the governance of all of those entities. This is in consideration of the charter schools as well as the districts. To Todd's point about the bridging strategy, it doesn't only affect the districts, it will also promote betterments with the charter schools as well, because they're all LEAs.
So from my understanding, the charter schools are using our systems that are a little bit more adaptable to this because they're smaller and they don't have the infrastructure in place at their charter schools. So I think the bigger districts are impacted more robustly than our charter schools. And I'm speaking not as an authoritative person on this, but that was my understanding, that the charter schools do use our systems a little bit more than our bigger districts. And the bigger districts would have more struggles moving over. That's
Right, we have got to wrap this up in like 2 minutes. So, Natalie.
I was just going to add to your comment that in some of the work that we've been doing on gathering teacher salary information, we don't have a system that does that right now. And so a lot of our smaller LEAs or smaller school districts are doing everything manually.
Okay.
They're typing things in. And so there are going to be efficiencies yielded system-wide by people having a standardized or consistent way to export data from one payroll system to, we'll hopefully be able to eliminate some of the work at our LEAs in addition to work that happens here while standardizing and forcing and teaching what data elements need to be, how they should be gathered.
Hey, yep, this is a problem, and I support upgrading it. I think we don't need a vote, Burnett.
No, this is just for further information and discussion. Again, it's part of the board's overall budget proposal, the $17.2 million, which is currently in front of the governor's office. To Jacob Wright's credit, who represents the GOMB with us with public education, he's asked a lot of good questions. Questions that hopefully we've provided answers to by way of this. My understanding is he's listening in on this. So, it's because, as I stated earlier, next week, my understanding is we're meeting with GOMB to further develop this specific ask. So it's really important that we get the message out on what problems this will solve. They tend to go towards a throughput type model, what will it reduce? I think we've demonstrated that. I think we're further supported by, what amount to audit findings that reflect that the system and data points need to be improved upon. I can't say that's a third party perspective. It's not just your internal staff's. So at a later date, we may want to consult with Director Davis on that particular, i.e. related to the recent release of the cactus audit. And we want to help. We want to assist our LEAs in telling all the great stories that they have. And by doing so with the least amount of impact to them, not making them come out of a new system. Responsible for all LEAs. Some of the districts have greater capacity, some charter schools have greater capacity than others.
Okay.
Chair, just one little comment. The challenge is we're in the compliance business, and we are going to keep failing audits, and and people's expectations until we get this fixed. Very high priority still. That's just a reality.
Heard nothing the last 15 minutes. That's what you need to hear. Amen. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to propose, it's 10:50, literally a 5-minute break. You go to the bathroom, and we need to talk to Chair Huntsman. So,
No, it'll be.
No, short ones are long ones.
Still on the board meeting because.
Right. He's thinking about buy one. I'm like, well, scan the rest. See what else we got. Thank you so much for your. Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Todd. I appreciate that.
It's hard. It's kind of like spending.
I feel really.
Well, it's, yeah, well, and they're.
I never seen it.
But we don't want to floor the system.
Yeah. We just lost our system over.
I want to do stuff for kids.
I don't think. So I just wanted to hear
It depends on what the agenda is.
I don't want to give you guys a number. I just really want to I really think it's.
You're in Davis.
There was a bunch of apps that was favor, but I still had questions.
They've gone through severe staff reductions. They used to have this staff.
Yes, I am kind of okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it'll be part of the report and then somebody can bring it up in the board. As far as this building goes, some of those improvements and stuff.
Come on, Zane, come on, I know you've just been reserved.
Give us a
Let's
shell.
go. Let's hear it. Tell people I want to hear it. Is this tax day or Christmas
South
day?
Georgia.
Well, can I throw something at you? Governor, legislators, other people in education.
Buying system, it's a lot of data.
I read to you about the pretty girl.
That PRB.
Had some concerns about some of your stuff. I think it has to.
Deals with other.
I think there's a lot of work we can do.
Well, there's
I mean, there's a lot of issues. So as far as the districts, are you presenting in there? Answer questions? How do you know? That are not probably
If not, this. You saw what happened yesterday. And then there were no.
So this is actually.
Yeah, well, we're happy to talk to you. Bigger than the details are pretty straightforward, so originally
Having
take cues from you.
strategic plan.
But we're still promoting the board.
Yeah. We're presenting.
It's a highlight, or not. We
Does it matter?
They've got a whole floor. Well, we want to do
the communication.
We don't have schools, do we?
Yeah, so we'll be brief.
What the difference is.
Okay, thanks a
A little
lot.
bigger than this. I've always been.
The board has to.
I was hoping it would give peace.
We need what we don't have, and this is where, what I hear everywhere I go, and I'm not exaggerating. People say to me all the time, with the PR.
There are a few gray areas where you have to
And
think.
what they mean by that is the part what we don't have is the part
So the state uses state office budgets, all of those.
Hey, but if you-
I understand that, but where are you gonna put it?
Oh, wait.
So those.
Yeah, I think it will.
Every state agency, if you look at US, show up to the table.
And I don't know.
Have these tribal boards, USBA, they're paying about
USDB.
No one knows. Part of their budget is about communication. How much is that?
Is it for the public?
Yeah, communication is key to inform the public. So one of the things that economic development is great as she everybody, they have these little bossy things they hand out.
How we doing?
And I have them registered dollars. Why can't you guys do that? And I say, I've got a teacher where you use it.
Shall we say we did, but it's not like.
What I don't have is that marketing design. If we don't have a person.
I'm told that.
Cost effective to contract out to that. So if you put this much, you say we need 300,000, but maybe we're only going to use 50. For us to do that kind of work. I think it should be especially to hire somebody full time, it has to be that. To rehire, you was reactive and proactive. So we put all of the communication together and say we got to be more proactive. We can do all of this
Look at what Ben Horsley does for grant. I'm just saying.
And Ben Horsley has a whole team behind him that do marketing and design, you know that, right?
Now he does. He didn't when I was there.
They had it when I was there. I was there 10 years ago. Because there was three people. One was design, one was kind of the office person.
They only had 2 people in the office.
Yeah.
He was hired after
I know, right? That's what I'm saying. It's like it's
when I was there.
And then another one that says.
Another guy.
For all their marketing stuff, those glossy brochures that I get in my mail, and all of that. I love those updates that they do. They contract all that out. They have a whole written report that does that.
Ahead of the minimum.
My other and they've got this big, and they're like, we want to make sure that we're compliant with the strategic plan. They have our strategic plan there, and then they have the governors.
Ours is a subset of the governors.
And ours is, yeah, well, they're both together, and they said, you don't choose to use because.
So we got on the wheel of education.
And that's the problem. So if we're gonna, to what end are we sending all this out?
My wife is, I'm going Mount Lincoln, this afternoon. And I haven't decided, she's going with her team, her rec league team. I haven't decided whether I want to go as well. You know, it's a team, so I'm not really welcome, and I'm fine with that. The question is, do I want to go down? And I'm selfish. If I want to go down, I want to have a good seat. I certainly don't want to sit with the hordes and fight for a seat. You know, I'm spoiled. So
when we started
you going to see someone staff for that?
My plan was to watch it, and then I realized I told my sister-in-law I was furniture shopping with her, and I was like, what was I?
Clearly, this is a huge mistake.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm like, okay, how fast can I get out of here? No more. Oh, okay.
That's good. Furniture shopping?
We're gonna, John, if it's okay, we're gonna hop to your item, the taxing entity committee. Everybody from the taxing entity committee, West Jordan City could come up.
We have no excuse.
I have a conflict. My firm and myself work in Jordan School District, so I'm going to recuse myself and turn over to Vice Chair Reeby. You guys can just call my mobile or text me when you're done.
I'll whistle. We're now moving on to item 1.10, Tax and Entity Committee. We're going to keep the time over to Scott.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, we are on item 1.10. Purpose of this agenda item is to discuss and take action on the taxing entity committee proposal for West Jordan City. If the gentleman at the table will introduce themselves. Vaughn, I think you should come up as well, please. If chair to allow. Vaughn Horton, he's a member of our staff. Also, John Larson is the business administrator from Jordan School District. Chair, if he could come up and take that fourth seat on the end, be productive and conducive to this particular agenda. Gentlemen, if you'll introduce yourselves first from the West Jordan City Taxing Entity Committee.
Kent Anderson, Economic Development Director for the City of West Jordan.
I'm Adam Long, Legal Counsel for the West Jordan Redevelopment Agency.
Vaughn Horton, USBE staff.
John Larson, Business Administrator, Jordan School District.
West Jordan has come forward with a redevelopment project that they'd like to bring to your attention. They would like to take some tax increment for a new project that's bringing in a server site in an area that's currently not generating tax revenues very well for the city. And we'd like to hear their proposal. It looks to be a good one, so would like to hear from them.
Thank you, Vaughn, for the time, and thank you, committee, for your consideration. This is this is the correct presentation. Thank you. It was sent over on October 16th, so that's why the date is there. This is actually a request to amend an existing EDA, and EDA number 4, the Fairchild. So this is a request for action from a taxing entity committee representation. The proposal, let's do a little background first. The Fairchild building is located at 333 West, 9000 South, and was originally set up for Fairchild Semiconductor to do modernization of the plant. The original proposal was in 2010 that was adopted. However, Fairchild never moved forward with their modernization, and so the EDA has essentially sat not collecting increments since 2014. The original budget was for $1.2 million over 10 years using an 80-20 calculation. Fairchild closed the facility in late 2014. So essentially the building has sat vacant since 2014. In 2017, the Redevelopment Agency of West Jordan entered in and purchased the facility, and then in 2018 sold it to a company called Aligned Energy, essentially a co-location facility for data centers. This proposal and budget amendment is specific to one tenant of Aligned Energy. So the tenant actually, or the recipient of tax increment will not be Aligned Energy. It's Project Pepper River. I'm always a little amused by project names. This one caught me as a little interesting because there's the Salt Lake, and now this is the Pepper River. So just as a little humor to add on to that. They're not at this time releasing the name of the entity. We anticipate that in about 2 weeks. It would be ready for the board meeting, so they would be aware who you actually would be entering an agreement, or the agency would be entering an agreement with. It's a Fortune 250 technology company. The Aligned Energy has completed, so here's a couple photos on the screen right now of the redevelopment of the facility to convert it into a data center project. Aligned Energy invested $16 million for rehabilitation. West Jordan, I mean, this is really a redevelopment proposal. It's gone from one facility to another. West Jordan entered into a participation agreement with Aligned Energy to rebate municipal energy tax, capped at $5 million over a 10-year period. So we already have some stake in the game to see this project be successful. Project Pepper River is proposing to take approximately 40% of the facility. calling this an anchor tenant for this project. They anticipate investing $663 million over a 10-year period. The proposed amendment to the budget is going to be, the request is a 10-year rebate of personal property taxes only. So this will not include regular property taxes. Proposed budget is a 60-40 split, so 60% of the revenue going to the agency, 40% going back to the taxing entities. There has been a request for mitigation payments for the 40%, which we anticipate including in the final budget. One change from the screen that's on there, the proposed budget would include 87% to come to the agency, 10% for housing, and then modifying 5% down to 3% for administration. The budget does have a cap at $6.8 million, and we would anticipate requesting activation if approved for 2019.
And just to add a tiny bit of clarity, this is different from the typical redevelopment project we're talking about. Building a building, coming up with a lot of real property value. This is a very targeted, very narrow approach. Pepper River is intended to be the anchor tenant. As Kent said, will occupy 40%-ish of the facility. This budget amendment is proposing that the agency receive a portion of the personal property taxes from Pepper River's property only. So basically, Pepper River comes in and puts hundreds of millions of dollars in servers in this building. This increment is just from those servers. So the other 60% of the facility, assuming it fills up, which we certainly hope it does, that all gets treated as normal. The agency doesn't get any portion of that. If the facility expands into more buildings in the project area and creates real property value, this budget wouldn't touch that. So this is a very targeted approach. And again, for 10 years with the agency retaining 60% of the new incremental tax revenues from that Pepper River personal property.
That additional clarification. One more item too, that through the Jordan School District there was a request for additional participation outside of a financial participation. Right now Project Pepper River is considering a couple ideas. One of them would be a career day for students to come and understand a little bit more about the data center process, and then creating an internship through their facility for the school district. So a couple of additional community partnership beyond just the financial request. Can we answer any questions?
I have a couple. So where is the school district right now on this? What is their?
The school district finance committee has met with West Jordan City as well as Pepper River. We've asked our questions and gone through our criteria. I shouldn't say criteria, we call them considerations. We have a list of 16 considerations we go through. They met very clearly 13 of those. So our finance committee is moving forward with a favorable recommendation to the board. The board has not heard this yet. It is anticipated that the full board will hear it on November 13th with a final vote on November 27th. But the finance committee recommendation.
There's always some considerations there with, coulda, shoulda, woulda, maybe, might. A career day is not a big deal. Internships. I mean, I'm hearing two things here. Is there anything on the in your considerations here that is greater than those two things that I've heard besides, of course, this taxing, the dollar part of it, but they're engaging the education community a little bit. Are they doing any more than those two things? Or are they making any other commitment to your school district?
Unique to the school district? Off the top of my head, I'm not thinking.
Maybe I can maybe I can respond, is that that's still under consideration, and they're actually putting together a letter to send to the school district to outline their specific bullet points of how they would like to participate. I think at that time we would expect the school district either to respond favorably or ask for additional considerations.
One of our lists is those type of participation, helping us with educational.
So this entity, Pepper River, they know what's coming in. There's, I've been on, I guess, on that side of the table before on a couple. And I was surprised because of the magnitude of this that there's not more at the table on from that entity of.
So among our other considerations is the 60-40 split is favorable, especially compared to existing tax increment projects as well as many of the proposed projects that come through. That's on our list. This being an industrial center is a very big interest to Jordan School District in particular. Our residential assessed valuation is outpacing our commercial and industrial, and so that's some of our considerations is trying to encourage more commercial industrial in our area. I could go down the whole 16 list if you want.
And we do have a representative of the company is here, anonymously, kind of. Not the name's not public, but if you have additional questions about what type of commitment they're willing to make, they've expressed very much a willingness to help Jordan School District, and they're simply in the process of working out what that looks like.
The water's getting to the end of the row here, and they're really engaged in civic, with a public civic school, and that's something a hair more. I was anticipating it a little bit more than a career day and maybe kind of things, but it's still real. They still can. I understand all that, but I was just curious if there's more than that than what's been presented.
Data technology internships is very much of interest.
So my understanding is that there's 40% that's going to be with the aligned energy, and then the other 60, the other way.
The other way.
So 60% is going to be captured by aligned energy, and then 40% is going to not receive any tax breaks. So that's money that's going to be generated through this project that is outside of the purview of what you're saying.
Maybe just a little bit clarification. The 60% will be captured by the agency.
Okay.
10% of that 60% will go to housing allocation. 3% will go to administration, and the remaining portion would then flow to Project Pepper River, which is a tenant of Aligned Energy.
So we have two different incentives going on at once here, to simplify. We have the municipal energy tax rebate offered by West Jordan City to Aligned Energy. Aligned Energy owns the building, so the shell, the power, the data center stuff inside. The tenants, including Pepper River, will come in, and this building is basically ready-made for them to put their servers and related equipment in. The tax increment we're talking about today is just part of the increment generated by Pepper River's investment. And we have multiple 60-40 splits here. So with the increment generated by Pepper River's investment, which we expect to be a total investment of $663 million over 10 years, agency is looking to capture and retain 60% of that. And the other 60-40 split we have here is Pepper River is expected to occupy about 40% of the total data center space in the Aligned Energy facility. So to the extent that that other 60% of the building gets filled up with other tenants, that's totally outside of this budget amendment and our request. That would just get treated normally.
Any other questions? I'm looking for a motion.
I make the motion that we have our representative vote in favor of the West Jordan City's proposal, as long as it's in alignment with district's vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much for your time. Cool. I just texted Jill. So we were on 1.5? 1.
So
let's go to 1.7. Do you want to?
Okay, well, there's 1.6 as well.
Oh,
We
sorry.
haven't covered 1.6 yet.
Okay. So
That
let's
is an action item.
key up 1.6, and Joel's walking in the door.
So 1.6 is further development of the carryover spend plans by section.
Thank you.
The process always takes place around this time of the year. Beginning last month, we provided you the carryover spend plans for most, if not all, most of the sections, but not all. Here are two more that we need for review. Staff are respectfully requesting a motion from the Finance Committee to recommend to the Board of Education that they approve the spend plans for both the proposed spend plans for the charter school section and the teaching and learning section. Both are in your backups. The first one is the charter school section carry forward spend plan. The other one being descriptive of the teaching and learning carry forward spend plan.
I sort of am. Any comments, thoughts, questions, members? Process, I appreciate it.
I saw, I'm trying to find I'm bringing mine up on my notes. Sure.
To approve the spend plans.
I'm surrendering. Keep dropping it.
So can I make a motion that we approve these spend plans for the charter and teaching and learning?
Further discussion?
So just one clarification, I think this is the wrong one that got loaded, but
There's
it's
just
right
one line
numbers.
missing.
Right.
It's the right numbers, there's just one line missing.
So the line that's missing is that of the amount that's available to obligate, there is $200,630.49 that will be moved into the board's discretionary budget that wasn't obligated with a spend plan. So they only obligated about $800,000 of the carryover. So if this is adopted, we would then move that excess money or that unobligated money into a place where the board could obligate it for additional purposes.
That would fit on this chart here?
So this one doesn't have that on there, but that's the piece that we added. Is just to make you aware that there is about $200,000 that is not obligated with these projects, and so that would be available for future obligation by the board at a later date.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it's unanimous. Should we make that consent calendar? Yeah, put that on consent, Cami. Hey, 1.7. Something passionate for Linda. And Kathleen, excuse me. Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Okay, 1.7, further consideration. We did keep this as an action item. Yesterday, my understanding, I apologize, I had to step out during Director Davis's update from the audit committee or on audit committee actions or information from the audit committee meeting where the audit committee recommended that this come back to the finance committee for a recommendation to the board that the staff assemble a study group or a work group to arrive at solutions towards the overall understanding of teachers needing or requesting or wanting funding for school, for classroom supplies and materials prior to the start of the school year. So it's back here for action or ratification, if you will, by the Finance Committee so that we can go ahead and move towards, because last month we talked about moving towards an audit. Further review now with study group will consist of representatives from the LEAs to arrive at the solutions, if you will, to what the stated problem is.
State your name.
So Debbie Davis, Director of Internal Audit for the State Board of Education. I just wanted to make one clarification to what Deputy Jones had said. The audit committee, we had some time constraints and then also quorum constraints. And so we actually did not take action on the audit request. So we can discuss it further in audit committee in our November meeting. That will be November 28th. There was some discussion about, yes, let's go forward with a work group or an audit. We could go either way. Both of those were discussed, but no action was officially taken by the audit committee. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Further discussion, questions?
Scott and I talked about it after the audit committee meeting. Concern was that it was the audit is backed up, or the audits are backed up quite a ways, right? So it would be a while before you guys could get to it, probably.
So we're about a year out. However, the board does have ability, if this is an audit you want to do, and it should be a priority, we'll be finishing the USTAR audit, and it could be started in December, January. It's subject to your prioritization. So you can bump anything that's existing if you'd like. Otherwise, we just tag it on the end, and it would probably be June or July before we'd start it.
So that's why we thought maybe a work group, possibly, right? Scott and I have kind of gone back and forth.
Well, if we did it June and July, that would impact our next school year because they'd be under the gun to change their policies, or they would enact it the next year after that. Any changes would.
Yes, so the timeline, unless it was decided or, by way of recommendation of the audit committee to change the priority of the audits, they're out, so a year from now is November of the next school year. So if we're trying to, this is why in discussions with board member Hanson, we started to lean towards a work group consisting of stakeholders from the LEAs to possibly make recommendations on rule changes or a code change. And that the legislative session is right around the corner. We're heavily immersed in the NEST work group right now. So the availability of staff is, I would say, is sooner than November of next year for a work group, not necessarily within the next couple of months though. So, timing wise, if the objective is to try to get to a resolution or a solution that's, acceptable to the board on behalf of the teachers or educators, work group is probably the best way to go. As Director Davis stated though, we can wait until the next audit committee, though my understanding is like November 28th. Okay, so, 3-4 weeks before back to the audit committee. So that's why we brought it back here, so you can consider all of the timing and efforts and surrounding an audit versus a work group.
The chair, if we want the board, if we want to take action, facilitate action on this, if finance, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, if the board to establish a work group, then member board meeting discussion, and then we act and move on it. Don't do something here, then it will still be talked about in audit, and something could come out of audit to the board, up to us.
Well, the two people who were in audit committee, there were only two people there. They seem to be kind of leaning towards thinking a work group was a better idea as well. So I'm afraid if it goes to audit, they might say, well, we want a work group anyway. So I think the value of a work group is that you have the stakeholders there, right? So our BAs, yeah, so they're involved and they can, kind of give input of how it's going to affect them and those kinds of things and issues.
I think it would best serve our board. Want this to go before the board.
That would be my suggestion.
For a motion.
I'll make that.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
So
The goal of this is that we're trying to get money to our teachers quicker. But so when I've spoken to the BAs, there's a difference between getting the money to them quicker because they're not hired until the day that they show up for their first day of the job. So my struggle is when we look at this and everybody looks at it differently, what's the goal? Is the goal to get money to our teachers faster, or is the goal to make the money easier to spend? So I'm not really seeing a goal that we're trying to accomplish. And because when I discussed trying to get money to our teachers quicker, my BA at the two districts I work with and at, they struggle with the fact that you can't give money to somebody until they're hired. And so that's like, how are we going to change that? So are we looking at this, what's the goal of this? Because you can't give the money to them any faster. They can turn in their receipts faster, but I just don't understand. Like, I want to know what the goal of this work group is, because it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to be a lot of energy. Yeah.
The issue is bigger than just getting money to them faster.
Yeah.
It's getting the money to them correctly, and meaning not just our rules and stuff, but there's statutes out there that says that this is how you get money, this is what you do with the money. So the discussion would be, what is within the work group, what's the easiest, fastest, quickest way and be in compliance to get that money to the teachers. And part of this work group would say, well, hey, if we're not under contract, how do we get it? How do we get it already? I mean, there's a bunch of different variables, and the districts are not consistent in everything else that they have going on how to do it. So a work group, you can control this in two different environments. It could be our auditors deal with this and their dialogue and saying, what do you do? How do you do it? Or we can, if we want this to be a betterment, or we see a betterment, we go to a work group. I best serve everyone to be in a work group versus the other route.
I'd also like to see consistency, because Board Member Hanson brought up that each district isn't allocating the same funds, but it should be consistent across every district.
And there might be something as simple as admission to, because the money routes through us. Mm-hmm. Quite a few options or opportunities to make this simple.
My struggle is, though, that the LEAs have to account for the money. And so when we decide how we should ask them to allocate the money, we also need to be cognizant of the fact that they need to be beholden to what the money is spent on. So
I think all of that can be discussed in the workgroup.
You have some
there's all kinds of issues, and we discussed some of them in audit, but there's all kinds of issues that Scott has found and Debbie's found as they've kind of looked into this.
Zane, please come up. State your name and title.
Board member Zane Wolstenhume, Business Administrator, Ogden School District. So I've involved with this particular program from its inception. From my standpoint, if you look at the code as it applies to this law, it's sort of a nuisance. Not everybody gets the same. It depends on what grades they teach, how long they've been teaching. It's really kind of an onerous thing from the district standpoint of figuring out how much should each teacher get. And then you have the question of what's the best way to get it to them. As was mentioned, there are 41 of us and probably 20 different ways it's being handled. I was at South Summit when it first came out. I liked the idea, and the way we handle it was, okay, teachers, we notified them, each of them, how much they had. We said, on a quarterly basis, you can turn in your receipts to us and we'll get you reimbursed for what you've spent. Because I don't think it's intended to be a stipend. But that's how a lot of districts are looking at it, or I think that's how a lot of teachers are looking at it. I've got this much money coming, get me that check as soon as you can, and it may not require that they turn in their receipts. Technically, it's taxable income if it's not accounted for and if they haven't made the expenditures. And we don't have proof that they've done that unless they're turning in receipts, and that is just a nuisance. We have 700 teachers in Ogden, and so what we do is once we know who we've got on staff, we, at the district office out of our department, we write 700 checks, and they're all different amounts depending on what grade they teach and how long they've taught, and everybody else gets to spread what's left, you know, so you see anyone getting from $120 and change to $200, and then we give them those checks. We sent them out last week. They're supposed to turn in their receipts to their schools, and then they'll give us so we can hang on to them. For what? I think there's got to be a more simple way of getting them money. Ideally, districts are giving them the supplies they need so they aren't spending money out of pocket. That's the other thing I've noticed from my standpoint. We give an allocation to schools for their budgets to buy supplies and textbooks and whatever. And almost always they have carryover. Almost always. So look at our allocation. I don't know. Maybe there's a better way to do it. So a work group, I would think, would be a good way to go to get the feedback from us to see what would be practical. It needs to be practical, it needs to be simple and effective and help whoever it is you want to help in the process. That's my comments.
Joel?
Mark?
I just wanted to make a simple comment. When I talked to Granite about this, they had already had a group that got together and talked about it, and they couldn't figure out how to resolve it either, but they said the same thing. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so I think, you know, if we got a work group together, then maybe we can come to that better way.
Can I make a motion? I'd make a motion and recommend to take this to the board for approval to recommend that USBE staff establish a work group that current LEA distribution methodologies and process for disbursement of the teacher supply and materials appropriation and determine the feasibility of teachers receiving their individual allotments prior to the first day of classes. The work group reviews the current policy and makes recommendations to the board for revisions if necessary.
Have a motion. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Would we like that on the consent calendar?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, consent calendar it is, please, Cami. Okay, I think we are now to 1.9. Done all 1.1 through 1.8 and 1.10. So we have 1.9 and 1.11 to. Is that correct?
Are we going to go back to 1.5 or is 1.5 not?
We discussed, and we're just going to put 1.5 on the full board agenda to have further discussion.
Okay. So clarification? Then?
Yeah.
When you say put it on the agenda, do you mean put the proposed spend plans on the agenda for use of the FML? Or is that how you want to proceed? Or do you want different ideas on use of the funds?
What would you prefer? Or maybe on it up to the full board? That'd be legitimate.
No. I don't have a problem with it going to the full board. I have concerns, and I'm willing to express some of those concerns. But, you know, I have no problem with what was presented to us going to the full board.
So with clarity on 1.5, sort of 1.9, would you invite Jamie Barrett to this? No, she's, okay, Natalie's doing it. Sorry, I thought she was in. So she's in. Okay, so if you'll refer to the handout that Natalie just gave you, she'll brief you off of this handout.
So we like to call this hot off the presses. So what you have before you is a 5-year history of what our CDC projections and October 1 head counts are. I wanted to go over a couple quick points just to give you a status update on where we landed after the head counts came in. So if you look at the last page of the document, and if you look at the orange columns, it's the second group on the right side of the document. Our current year head counts that came in are 659,438 students. That is an increase from prior year of 7,091 students. So last year we had 652,347. So that growth is a little bit less than it has been in the past. As you can see, we've fluctuated between 2014 and now. In 2014, we had statewide growth of about 9,500 students. In 15, we had 1,200, 11. Our growth factors have traditionally been going down, or statistically been going down. We've also seen in our data that birth rates are actually going down as well. So students entering kindergarten, those numbers aren't as high as they have been in the past. One of the other factors that impacts student growth is migration. I'm sure as you know, there are lots of people moving into the state. There's lots of economic growth. There's lots of areas that are growing residentially quite quickly. So our models have to adjust to capture those migration pieces as well. Just for your point of reference, in the current fiscal year, we had projected that there would be 660,028 students in the system. We came in at 659,438, which means that we overprojected by 590 students.
That's pretty close, though.
That is very close, and the statisticians are really happy that it's so close, and the accountants are having heartburn because it's way too close. So as you can imagine, in our Common Data Committee, it's very difficult to make the whole group happy. We want to always overproject because that means we have enough money in our budget to ensure that we can sustain the value of the WPU. Carryover balances become very important this year. Item that came out of the CDC committee, and I believe this was brought up at the last board meeting, we have a rather large company that is appealing their centrally assessed, I think it's the Union Pacific, it's appealing their centrally assessed property tax values. We estimate, and the tax commission estimates, that about $5 million worth of centrally assessed property taxes will not be received by our school districts this year. Effectively what that means is the amount that the state will be kicking in for the WPU will go up by that almost exact amount this current year. So having carryover balances in our system enables us to react to situations like that. Over projecting by 590 students helps us with that. We also yield additional revenue if the basic levy comes in higher than planned. So just so you're aware, we don't have any concerns about being able to sustain the value of the WPU this current school year. As soon as we finish budget projections, which occur within the next week and a half, we will move on to doing major updates and hopefully get those adjusted for most of our major programs for our LEAs by November. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to is what we were projecting for next school year. So that is reflected in the green column on the end. It's the fourth column in on that spreadsheet. It's called CDC projection. The CDC committee met, I think it was last week. They all kind of run together at this point. The CDC committee met and we agreed upon the number of 666,188, which is a growth from this year of 6,750 students. The models actually came in a lot lower. They came in at about 6,000 students, and the group as a whole was very uncomfortable with that. We felt that number was way too low. So we were able to add a few students into the larger districts where we have traditionally missed. As you go through, I'm not going to go through all of the points. I wanted to make sure that this was available. You could send it. We could ask questions or provide information if you'd like. Keep in mind as we do projections to actual, I don't think we've ever had a year where we've always 100% projected what happened in any LEA. The overs and unders in our LEAs kind of, as a system, even each other out. We traditionally, in our larger school district like Jordan, we have missed their projection every year by about 1,500 students. That area is growing pretty drastically, and it's hard to capture where students are going to show up, whether they're in districts or charters. The thing to focus on, though, as you message this to your constituents, is that we project, while we have a lot of detail on the sheet, if there's an over in one school district and an under in the other, we have the ability to shift that money without any intervention. So this is data, this is informational. No one will be harmed because there is an under projection in one district. We're not cutting their funding. We have the ability and plenty of WPUs to move those around. So just informational as well. I know as we're talking about the 2020 budget projections, we're still looking and calculating how much actually growing 1% of the WPU would be. So as we calculate those numbers and settle on those with the governor's office and the fiscal analyst's office within the next 2 weeks, at the November, right? As the December board meeting rolls around, we'll have actual numbers that we've all agreed upon for growth. There wasn't anything aside from the Union Pacific thing that showed up in our work this year that we were significantly concerned. Wanted to provide you an update as soon as this was provided to the board. We plan on posting this on our website and sending it out to our LEAs so they have the same information. For those who don't have the knowledge, the CDC committee is made up of the governor's office, the fiscal analyst's office, our office, the tax commission, and members of the Kim Garner Institute at the University of Utah. This group as a whole works through assessed valuations. We work through student population projections and migration. We calculate WPUs together and then settle on a finer dollar amount. So there are many eyes that are being added to this process, in addition to the calculation of some of the formulas this year in the automation system, which has helped us out a lot in double checking and ensuring that our formulas and calculations are correct.
Kathleen?
This doesn't really have to do with the projections, but the identifiers on the side are confusing to me. All the districts are 1 through 42, and then the numbers start again at 1 when you get to New Ames, and it goes A1 and then it goes 1B. Is this just when they were created, or?
Yes, so the ID number, the 1 through 41, or 42 if you will, you'll notice that 41 is missing. That's the schools for the deaf and the blind. Having consistent data definitions would have been great. When we put charter schools into the mix, they started, as you can see, with numbers, but then we ran out of numbers because at the time the Cactus system can only do 2 digits. And so then they moved on to A's, but then we ran out of A's, and so then they started going, you can see how those patterns have changed.
So then we went from 42 to 68, and then we go to 98, and then we go to A1, okay.
Yes. So effectively, these ID numbers, you might hear us call them phases.
Okay.
It's a unique kind of sub-vendor code that enables us to consolidate information and report to the LEAs. Every LEA has a unique ID, and this is the unique ID. None of us that are currently here picked this numbering scheme, and it causes sorting issues all the time. So, yeah, yes.
Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. I'm just like, I don't understand these patterns here.
Don't try.
Okay.
It is.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. I was wondering if the letters actually.
They are not letter grades. No, they are just
not just like clustered into certain types of categories. So
no, we add. I think we're up to M or L now. So every time we add a new charter school.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Hopefully Jacob Wright heard that. Well, good, Jacob.
Do you need a motion or just an information?
No, this was just for your information.
Okay. I think we're done with that. That's very good. Well done on the projections. Quite a task. Go to 1.11, section review, career and technical education.
Chair, if you'll invite Director Longhurst to the table, and do you want Wendy?
Diane's going to come.
Oh, Diane? Yeah,
Wendy's
absolutely, Diane.
Bless you.
I always want to take a chance of making Wendy come up.
I'm good. But thank you. Please.
Yeah, come on up here, Wendy.
It would make my day if you did.
We have plenty of room.
Yes. First of all, by way of the process for this particular agenda items, every month a section comes forward to you, or comes here, and does a presentation to orient you to their section. You'll see that. There's a presentation, so we'll just ask that Talia go ahead and go through the presentation. We'll go to the budget. I'm bringing up the PowerPoint now on the screen. You have the PowerPoint in your backup system. Tell me next slide, okay?
I will. Happy to. Wow, this is quite the committee today. Talia Longhurst, Director of Career and Technical Education here at the State Board of Education. With me, I have Wendy Morton, who's one of our CT coordinators, and Diane Sutton, who is our financial analyst with me. And they're going to be able to answer all your questions. But I can take as little or as much time on the presentation as you'd like. Next slide, Vanna. Thank you. The first slide. How long?
About 10 minutes.
No worries, we'll go quickly. The first slide really just talks about the mission and purpose of career and technical education. Our job is to provide career exploration and career training for students in the state of Utah. And that's really what that slide says in a lot of different ways and sentences. Really looking at a variety of settings and levels, including middle school, junior high schools, post-secondary programs. We work in collaboration with our partners at the technical college system and at higher education as well. Next slide, please. This is really one of the slides that you probably want to pay attention to. These are the programs that we oversee that are mandated by federal code, state statute, and board rule. That includes career and technical education, the Carl Perkins Law, and remind me to mention to you, don't let me forget, Wendy, about our new Perkins Act that was signed into law this year. We have some MSP programs through State Code 53F Section 2. Lots of board rules there around CTE and elementary and secondary core curriculum. We also oversee general financial literacy in our section. We have a computer science initiative, the IT Academy, online assessments. We get some ProStart money that flows back to a vendor that provides that to our students. We have STEM dropout recovery program and an outdoor recreation grant, and I'd be happy to answer questions about any of those if you'd like. Next slide, please.
Oh, I'd like to ask a question. STEM Lab Dropout Recovery Program, what's that?
So that is, there's actually no bill or anything, anything that goes along with it. It is a line of money, $250,000 for 2 years now, FY18 and FY19. That is money that flows to an LEA to select a vendor to provide some STEM dropout recovery programs. We've worked with a couple of LEAs who have gone partway down the road and then returned the money. We're currently working with Iron School District. They've just selected a vendor and they're working on getting a contract signed and making sure that it meets the intent.
Thank you. Makes sense now.
Okay. Go ahead and go on. Our current FY19 Perkins dollars is a little over $14 million. Most of that money flows out to secondary and post-secondary. That money is in a 60-40 split right now. Post-secondary receives 40% of those funds. Secondary receives 60% of those dollars. We also have a little over, well, just a little under $98 million in state CT add-on dollars that flow directly out to the secondary LEAs with approved programs. Let me just stop here and mention what I alluded to a minute ago. So in July of this year, Congress passed, both the Senate and the House passed a new act called the Strengthening Career and Technical Education Act for the 21st Century. And the president signed that into law. We're referring to it as Perkins 5. It's much easier than the big long name because it continues, it really goes on to continue the work that has been done in career and technical education and some of the great things that are happening. Here, I pulled up a document so I could refer to it. There are some changes that Perkins 5 will make. Some of those things that I wanted to highlight include it gives us some additional definitions to work with. It changes up our accountability a little bit, but still provides us the opportunity to show some of the things that the Perkins funds do for our students here in Utah. It also, currently in Perkins 4, our funding is restricted to what a state defines as a secondary student for Utah. That would be 7 through 12. It allows us to spend money now as low as 5th grade, which allows us to start providing some career exploration earlier to students as LEAs choose to implement that. It also allows us a chance to reset our maintenance of effort requirement. We can now reset that once, reset our baseline at no less, I want to make sure I say this right, no less than 95% of our current reporting structure. So we have plans to take advantage of that and reset our MOE to that level. So those are just some of the quick highlights. We'll be doing a transition plan next spring for 1 year, and then we'll be working closely with our partners, with all of you, as we set a new plan for Perkins 5. Any questions that you might have around Perkins 5? We're excited about it. It happened very quickly. It was kind of a fun thing to watch happen through Congress. Okay, background information. This slide that's on the screen right now really just highlights some of the programs and the way that our section is structured. Our career pathways they revolve around the career clusters that are kind of a national model of how to sort careers for students to participate in that training. Our specialists that you'll see a chart of in just a moment, we kind of tried to group them by program area. You can see a list there. We work with currently 7, soon to be 8, career and technical student organizations. We've recently added a career pathway in education. We call it K-12 teaching as a profession. So for students who are interested in going into education as a career, there is a pathway, and we've got a lot of LEAs taking part in that and participating. We'll be adding the career and technical student organization called Educators Rising to our mix here in Utah. Next slide, please. You can see our staffing right here on the left. It's just broken out by funding source. We have 22.4 FTEs in my section. The organization chart is on the right. Ahead. And this just summarizes our FY19 dollars. We have $112 million going out, about 110 in pass-through. So the vast majority of what we do is pass through to secondary and post-secondary institutions. We keep a little bit here to pay for that staff, and then we have those line items that I've talked about previously. And this is just the last slide. It's a pie chart that just shows we get a lot of money through our section. Most of it goes out. We work really hard on monitoring requirements, making sure that people are doing things appropriately, and that we provide technical assistance, professional development, all of those kinds of things to make sure that our students have the best opportunities possible. I think we'll pull up the budget next for you to look at.
Budget is reflective of July through September, so this is as of September 30th, I believe. So questions about the expenditure rates, please keep in mind that it's inclusive or reflective of the first 3 months of this current. As was articulated yesterday by Deborah within the sections themselves, not here, but by way of the link provided monthly by Deborah, you'll be able to drill down within the programs and see dollar for dollar where the expenditures are taking place. That would include expenditures that go towards third-party services, not just within CTE. Wanted to call that out and make sure. You have the overall first page, which is the overall screenshot or snapshot as of September 30th. Graphs, but then you get them. Questions for Diane or Wendy as far as the status goes? Mark?
I don't have one on the budget, but it's handy to see. But I have one on operational. A lot of exciting things. CTE is quite popular in with a lot of the LEAs, and there's a lot of fun stuff happening. Is there something that we need to be doing better as a board? It's probably nice that we're not in there messing things up, I guess, but is there any betterments? Is there anything that, I guess I'll throw out, is there anything that we could be doing better? And then the other part, my other question is, as things come on and off, I like to track that list. There's this evolution of some cool stuff, and then it's probably not so cool that kind of, how is that communicated?
So when things,
how do I see it easily, I guess, or is it?
So let me be clear that I understand your question. When things come on or off the list, are you referring to budget items? Are you referring to programs?
I'm seeing programs that, and on the program side.
So every August, you receive on the consent calendar a list of programs or pathways to approve. And we give you a summary of what those changes are each year as the board approves those. And then just this morning, we presented to the Standards and Assessment Committee. We have a 3 to 4 year rotation, depending on the specific pathway of course standards. And so you'll start to see those. This was our first year going through that process. So you'll start to see those things. There's a summary of each, for each course and each program area of what changes are being made. So you see those already. If there's a better way that I can share those with you, I'd be happy to.
I see what happens, you know, but I don't see as the I guess question is, I see that one report and that's on the list. So I said, okay, this is off, this is on, but and then I think we ratify it. Correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm asleep at the wheel here. But we see it and we can comment, we can dive on it, but it's already kind of set in stone. Not?
Well, it's on consent calendar for you to approve if you wanted to.
Well, we approve it. But is there any involvement that we should be ahead of that, looking out there trying to find creative solutions or be in a support of you instead of, I get a feel that we're reactive on our consent calendar, and it's, again, I'm not saying I need to spend a lot of time on your business because it's
right.
a great job.
So I have to think about how I want to say this. So one of the things that there's some terminology that is in statute around career and technical education where the board has a responsibility to help sunset programs when they are not contributing directly to the economic needs of the state, to the careers of the 21st century, maybe is how I want to say it. We don't have a really good way to do some of that sometimes. Sometimes I think schools are held back a little bit on changes that they want to make because they've just always done a particular thing and it may not be easy to change. And so I don't have an easy answer for you as to how to make that better, but I think it's something we can certainly put some minds to, and if we need some assistance.
We're not after an answer to date, so
Right.
it goes on our to-do, but if there's anything, betterments that we can do as a board to better support CT, that's what I'm inviting.
Excellent.
I'd like to invite, if that's okay, through this committee.
Joel?
You just have a minute more here. Linda.
Okay, then I'll talk really fast.
Yes.
So I got an email from a lady a couple of days ago, and she had some CTE concerns, and those were the kinds of concerns that a lot of it was outdated, that her kids wanted to take classes that were a little bit more updated. I think that is a problem that we have, a concern that we have with LEAs, because when you change, you're changing a teacher, and then, you know, so someone might lose their job, and so that's a concern. And so I'm not sure how to do that either, but I know that, like I said, I've heard from a constituent lately about that. And so I think those more updated classes for our kids.
Thank you for that. One of the things we try to do is to offer it at our level lots of options. What LEAs choose to offer in their schools is certainly their decision. We work with them to try and help them understand what's out there. With New Perkins 5 comes along some requirements for local needs assessments, working within their communities to see that what they're teaching is matching what is needed in their communities. We have a long way to go, and there's a lot of opportunities to improve.
That must be a 12 o'clock bell.
Mm-hmm. We still have 2 minutes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Moving on to the last one, 1.12. I guess first question: will we have a finance committee meeting in December?
Yes, you will.
Will it meet after the full board meets?
Yes.
Okay, and so we would be approving things that will go on to the brand new full board in January.
Yeah, the system does not shut down.
Okay, so we will indeed be meeting. Is there any then
Bring treats. It'll be our last time. We have a party.
requests for data? Okay, a festive request.
Any request for data?
Treats. You have to bring all the treats.
Because I will bring data and information on the Sun Devils winning over the University of Utah on Saturday. So, find out for the good of the group.
That's completely lost on me.
Oh, there are 7.
Devil's food.
It's like a 10-point result, essentially.
Motion to adjourn?
Or I'll bring the data on why they lost. So.
I would love to have some discussions along with these fees. If we could get schools, can you imagine if you had a business and you said, well, how much do we spend on rent? They said, I don't know. How much do we spend on labor? I don't know. How much do we spend on janitorial services? I don't know. I mean, my kids go to American Fork High School. It does budget over $10 million a year. It'd be nice if we say, oh, well, how much do we spend on the boys' football or the band? They said, well, we spend $200,000, but we receive $800,000 in revenue, from outside sources and fees. To really have a serious discussion, could we ask our schools, especially on anything that's collecting fees, that they would kind of give an audited financial saying, okay, here's where the fees came, include it in their finances. I think if they don't know that, I hate to put more burdens on our schools, but if they don't know that, that's alarming.
That's certainly more transparent. Yeah.
It's certainly more transparent if you're going to use taxpayer funds. And I think it'd really help with our fee, discussion and enforcement as well. If the public simply knew, oh wow, okay, so you collected, $1.5 million in fees for the American Fork Band. How was it used? And that kind of transparency. So, Scott?
Yes, the answer, Chair, is yes. As you know, school level reporting is a process that we've undertaken. So let us come back to you for for December. Is that okay? For December to show you where we're at on school. I think that might help answer.
Are we getting resistance from our LEA friends? No. Because I as a business manager, really want to get this information to it. I think there are dark forces out there that do not want that information.
This was the first year we gathered school level data. It can always get better, but we have it this year, which is the first.
So could we know revenue for the American Fork High School?
Get it ready. It doesn't go down to program level right now. School level and function. So rent, utilities, salaries.
Just make sure I take my mouth.
You can see exactly how much is brought in.
Live without
In the red or in the green, and how many.
Anything else?
My mouth.
His mouse.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry, we missed Spencer today. I missed you, Spencer. Wherever you are.
Very generous, Linda. I did not first.
I miss Spencer.
And I was a little.
I miss you too, Joel.
I'm plugging here.
Thank you.
But it does make sense.
I have the other piece there too. Thanks.
Oh, yes, you do.
Thank you. Complete job there. Yeah, so I had to scream at it. We're all sitting at a table, not us. People sitting at a table.